Lady Ada was the only daughter of Duke Goldwyn, head of the noblest lineage in the entire empire. She was destined to marry the crown prince by mandate of the oracle, a destiny sealed since her birth. With each passing day, the young woman became more beautiful and noble, and her beauty captivated the hearts of many. On the day of her wedding to the crown prince, all the inhabitants of the empire admired her and envied. The joy was palpable. The other ladies commented that they were a lovely couple, made for each other, something everyone could notice. Everyone believed that His Highness, the crown prince, must be head over heels in love with her. But the truth was different. No one imagined what would happen next, as everyone dreamt of happiness and prosperity for the young couple. After the wedding night, the crown prince would say something Ira could not believe, and her rosy world will collapse. He will demand, bluntly, the annulment of the marriage from the young lady, a blow that will shake everyone. Albert went to see his parents and also informed them that he wished to annul his marriage to Ira. His father reminded him that the imperial family only marries the oracle's chosen one. A sacred rule. The prince spent the wedding night with her. He must have felt it. But nothing. Where are the butterflies? They say that the descendants of the god Senius are only attracted to the chosen ones, not by mortals. Albert believed that Lady Golding would change him. It would give him the ecstasy of love. But, bam, total disappointment. And the truth is that the crown prince never felt anything for any woman. His heart was an iceberg. He was waiting for the golden mark, only for the oracle's chosen ones, the seal of his destiny. But nothing. He approached her with anticipation, but the connection he imagined did not materialize. After a brief kiss, the prince pulled away from Ira. His gaze was a sea of doubts and questions. The protagonist noticed the prince's intense gaze, scrutinizing her, and saw the confusion in his eyes. It was obvious the mark did not appear on her back. She felt lost, alone, like a leaf in the wind. The crown prince confessed that it was very strange to feel nothing for Lady Ira. It was terrible. The young man backed away. The girl's heart shrank from sheer fear and anxiety about her destiny. Albert's parents were stunned by their son's words. They didn't know how to react. The prince said that Lady Ira was like any other woman. But the truth was very different. The empress, confused, exclaimed that it was impossible. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Albert asked if it was true that Lady Ada was the oracle's chosen one. His voice was calm. It was the first time in the history of the empire that the chosen one did not pass the union ritual. Who would have imagined that Lady Ada was not the chosen one, and that her destiny would be so unfortunate? It is rumored that the new chosen one comes from a minor branch of the Goldwyns. It was a bombshell. Now Lady Ira's future was uncertain. How would she overcome this devastating blow of fate? They said that marrying the crown prince's ex-fiancé was humiliating and shameful. No one wanted a woman who understood neither her feelings nor her destiny in life. Now, the woman whom the entire empire mocked was called an imposter. What an injustice! That night, the protagonist could not fall asleep. Tormented by anguish and despair, Ira desperately begged for someone to help her and hear her painful experience. A year passed like this, and Lady Ira's life changed unimaginably. Every night, this woman began to frequent Twinville, where no one knew her or expected her. It was a mystery what Lady Goldwyn was doing in a place where she felt so alone. People laughed at Ira, believing she was desperate to find a husband. But they were wrong. The protagonist banged the glass on the table, thinking everyone was a charlatan. If it weren't for this, the young woman would not have come. But her heart was a whirlwind of doubts and anguish. Ira knew it. She had to find someone who truly understood her as soon as possible. Suddenly, the young woman's mask shattered, leaving her vulnerable and completely lost. Everyone fixed their gaze on the imposter, unable to hide her true feelings any longer. Those present confirmed that Lady Goldwyn visited Twinville. But the question was, for what? The protagonist was furious because her mask had fallen, and she had no idea what to do now. Ira shook off those thoughts. She could no longer hide from anyone, not even from herself. If only the protagonist could sleep, everything would be different. But this night seemed eternal. Suddenly, the young woman felt that sharp headache that gnawed at her soul again. The protagonist collapsed, but strong arms caught her, and a shiver ran down her spine. A stranger with dark hair and golden eyes asked if the lady was all right. With a soft voice, the protagonist looked at the man, surprised. Her headache had instantly disappeared. Ira smiled playfully and asked if the man could help her, as she felt very lonely. The stranger ordered his men not to wait for him. He wanted to help this mysterious lady. The protagonist murmured that she felt a little uncomfortable, but at the same time felt curious about him. The young people arrived at the girl's house, where an atmosphere of mystery reigned and anticipation. The stranger was surprised that no one was there. Only the soft whisper of their hearts filled the night. The protagonist wrapped her arms around the man's neck and begged him to accompany her. Her voice sounded insistent and sweet. Ira asked him to spend the night with her because she couldn't fall asleep, and she sought comfort. She confessed that lately she suffered greatly from insomnia and a deep lack of peace in her soul. The stranger was stunned when the lady threw him onto the bed. Totally unexpected and bold, the protagonist sat on top and looked at the man languidly, while her eyes shone with curiosity. The stranger suggested the lady see a doctor if she suffered from insomnia, with genuine concern. Ira, with a smile, said she was already in treatment and hoped to soon get rid of her terrible problem. The man shuddered when he felt the young woman's hand on his chest. What a surprise and how exciting. The stranger said he didn't understand absolutely anything the lady was talking about, and his voice trembled a little. The protagonist moved even closer to the man, causing him to blush instantly from shyness and embarrassment. Faced with this innocent gesture, the young woman smiled mischievously. She felt safe and desired being close to him. Then, Ira declared that handsome men were her medicine because they could cure her soul of suffering. The protagonist saw such an adorable face on a man for the first time and couldn't look away. The stranger's body was also beautiful, so the medicine must be super effective. The man's eyes widened when he felt her lips upon his. He was petrified. The protagonist pulled away slightly, feeling the man's heart beating strongly. He clearly liked the kiss. The stranger's breathing was ragged, because he didn't expect everything to happen so fast. So suddenly, Ira felt that she also felt strange, as if the world around her had changed. Something wasn't right. The headache disappeared after the kiss, and she felt a lightness in her soul like never before. Suddenly, the protagonist felt an oracle's golden mark light up on her back. And that was very strange. Ira felt a calm inside her, which invaded her for the first time in a long time, and gave her hope. A light at the end. The protagonist's eyes started to close slowly due to exhaustion, and she couldn't help but fall asleep. It was inevitable. Then, the young woman collapsed onto the man's chest, and he held her tightly, as if protecting her from the world. The protagonist woke up to the radiant sun, illuminating and warming her face. For the first time in a long time, Ira felt really good, as if her fears were dissipating. The woman was surprised not to have a hangover. After everything she drank the night before, Ira supposed her current state might be due to that golden-eyed man. Everything was different. She felt alive and full of energy after her encounter with him. The protagonist was determined to discover the identity of that handsome, mysterious man. At that precise moment, the stranger was training with the sword. His movements were perfect. His comrades discovered that the commander had been to Twinville and got excited. This place was the most popular club among young aristocrats, attracting everyone present. The commander fought against monsters since he was a child to survive. That's why he didn't have time for women. But the knights believed the commander also deserved a personal life and happiness in love. It quickly became known among the subordinates that a lady had thrown herself upon the commander, and he accompanied her home. One knight even ventured that they might have fallen in love along the way. It would be wonderful for both. A handsome man with golden eyes approached his subordinates and told them they were talking nonsense. The knight asked him if he had enjoyed being with that girl yesterday, and if he hadn't been happy alone with her. The man recalled all the events of that strange previous night, which he couldn't get out of his head now. His face turned intensely red when remembering the recent audacity and bravery of the stranger. He was perplexed that the girl had fallen asleep on his chest. It was unexpected and pleasant at the same time. The commander looked at her and understood how beautiful she was. Her sweetness captivated him instantly. He didn't understand if all women were as soft and pleasant as this mysterious stranger with golden eyes. Every time monsters attacked the villages, orphans appeared, and it was terrible. The golden-eyed man was one of them, and nobody knew his story. He took up a weapon before coming of age and grew up surrounded by blood and smoke. The only women he felt anything for were his battle comrades. When the hero became commander of a squad of knights, he despised those who neglected training for women. The soldiers said in unison that resting with a woman boosted morale, but not everyone understood it. Our hero was one of them, as he saw nothing good in sleeping with a woman, and it seemed strange to him. Could it possibly be different from sleeping with a man? When he touched a woman, he felt absolutely nothing, and that disconcerted him. However, now the Knight Commander didn't understand why his heart was beating so fast. As if he had run a marathon, the man gently touched the young woman's lips. His hands trembled with emotion. He felt as if a curse had befallen him, something truly strange for him. The Knight Commander quickly got out of bed, trying not to wake the stranger. How difficult. Then, the man tucked the girl in well with the blanket, so she would be comfortable, and his body would not disturb him. Covering himself with a cape, the Knight Commander hurried to leave. Avoiding unnecessary questions, the man told his subordinates that nothing had happened, but they didn't believe a word of it. Immediately after, the commander asked irritably who wanted to fight him right now and demonstrate their strength. One of the knights pushed the subordinate forward, saying he didn't want to die in battle. The commander started yelling for the soldiers to take their weapons immediately and prepare for the enemy attack. The subordinate attacked first, but his opponent easily stopped the blow and claimed victory. The commander was sure that his body reacted this way because he had stopped training some time ago. Everything would improve if he returned to training and regained his strength and personal confidence. He had to achieve it. The protagonist was furious because the stranger had left without saying a single word to her. Ira decided she would find that man at any cost and discover everything about him. She jumped out of bed, begging her sleeping pill to wait a moment and give her time. The heroine lay back on the bed, writing down every detail she remembered about the man. Trying to understand, she spent all day thinking about it, but it was useless. She remembered nothing. Frustration overwhelmed her. The girl realized that she urgently needed to know his name to unravel this mystery. Ira was furious with herself for remembering nothing. This powerlessness consumed her inside. She opened the closet, determined to find that man as soon as possible. She needed a clue now. From among a sea of objects, the young woman took out a black lace mask, the one she used in that place. Suddenly, the door to Ira's room burst open, and a woman appeared very worried. She asked with disappointment if the young lady had been in Twinville again, because the capital spoke of nothing else. The estate employee reminded her that Ira's father was already in a delicate state, so she had to control herself. The woman added that now the young lady must find a good husband to improve her situation. Urgently, the employee panicked when Ira, smiling, declared that she had no time for such nonsense right now. She promised her mistress that if she found a good match, her father would undoubtedly improve over time. Surely, 6 months ago, the doctor reported that her father had a serious mental illness, something that worried Ira. If it weren't for the high priest, the man would not have been saved, and that kept Ira in constant distress. Following the priest's advice, the protagonist arrived in the capital, hoping for the best and wishing to help her father. Ira only wanted one thing, for her father to recover and come back to live with her. The protagonist closed her eyes against the growing headache, trying to concentrate. The maid panicked upon realizing that her mistress was unwell again and needed help. In the morning, everything was fine, and Ira even slept well, which gave her hope for a good day. The heroine's father remained in a coma, but upon waking, he always asked for his daughter with distress. Precisely because of that, the girl had to keep going and live for her father, despite the difficulties. But that damned headache and insomnia were killing her, making her feel exhausted. Unlike her father, Ira received no divine help and felt alone in her suffering. The doctor told her that if she didn't sleep, she would die within half a year due to lack of sleep. In stress, the only medicine for her was that man who helped her forget her nightly nightmares. But Ira knew perfectly well that she would not be able to recover what she had lost. The protagonist had to survive at all costs. She couldn't afford to give up. At that precise moment, the Knight Commander was training with his sword, polishing his skills. He stopped upon seeing the silhouette of that girl in front of him, the one that wouldn't leave his mind. The man froze, not understanding if it was real or not. His heart beat faster. Immediately after, he softened his weapon again, trying to concentrate on the training and not get distracted. The Knight Commander looked at his right hand, which began to tremble from excitement and tension. The imaginary image of the stranger began to whisper something in his ear, making him lose concentration. The Knight Commander covered his ear, realizing he was going crazy because of her. He couldn't stop thinking about that beautiful stranger. Her image didn't leave his mind for a second. A single image of her was enough to light the flame of desire in his chest. Nothing like this had ever happened to the commander, losing concentration over a woman. Incredible. His comrades, behind his back, asked what he was doing, as he had been distracted from training. The soldiers recounted that they had decided to have a drink to relax after a long day of effort. They invited the commander to go with them to Twinville, where fun was always guaranteed. It was there that he met her, that enigmatic stranger who had completely captivated him. The knight commander announced that he would go with them. He didn't want to be left out. They were extremely happy, because now the boss would pay for everything, and not the common soldiers. The man began buttoning his clothes hastily, trying to look his best. He didn't understand why he wanted to see her again. It was so sudden and unusual, everything so confusing. The protagonist was at the venue, looking around for a clue. She had been wandering for hours, unable to recall the night everything changed. Ira had not slept for 3 days and was very drunk from her worries. 3 men approached the protagonist with an arrogant smile and spoke to her. They asked if they could keep the beauty company to entertain her that night. Ira smiled mockingly and apologized, saying she was currently looking for a handsome man. One of the guys became furious when he heard the girl's words. It clearly hurt him. He asked if the girl still thought she was a princess and believed someone needed her. The man grabbed Ira by the arm, saying she needed to be taught a lesson for her insolence. The protagonist demanded that he let her go immediately. She wasn't going to give up easily. The guy bluntly stated that Ira was just a bastard, the daughter of a nobody. What humiliation. They mocked her, saying the girl's father was just a mere prostitute. How degrading. These words definitely hurt the protagonist. She felt a surge of anger and fury. So she bit the man's wrist, wanting to show him her strength and independence. The masked hero instantly became enraged and raised his hand to strike Ira. His rage was palpable, but another hand immediately stopped him, interrupting the conflict and capturing everyone's attention. The masked stranger turned to see who it was and why he was interfering in the fight. The knight commander looked coldly at the man. He was not going to tolerate such behavior. The protagonist had no idea who this guy was or why he appeared right at that moment. The captain asked the girl if she was okay. His voice sounded firm and serene amidst the chaos. The young men looked at each other, each feeling an explosive mix of emotions in that crucial instant. The rough guy raised his fist, warning the stranger not to meddle where he wasn't called, and to leave her alone. If he wanted to play the hero, he should find another girl willing to play along in his strange adventures. The captain was petrified to hear that this woman only wanted a man for one night, and nothing more. Many wondered if that rumor was true, and if it was worth checking for themselves whether the theory was true. She exclaimed that noble Lady Goldwyn had fun with men in Twinville every night, and without any remorse. The masked man almost lost hope that this rumor was true, but now he saw it with his own eyes. Many knew that the girl left yesterday with a man, and they never saw her again, although the rumors were varied. The protagonist felt an unbearable headache attack her again, not knowing how to stop it. Out of nowhere, the knight captain rescued a young woman who was in a desperate situation. He saw that the beautiful stranger needed urgent help and could not ignore it. It would be unforgivable. The man with golden eyes clarified that she could refuse if he was mistaken, and that would be his last word. Ira stared astonished at the man's hands, not understanding who he was or what he wanted from her at that moment. The headache vanished and the protagonist felt calm, as if all problems had disappeared. Then, Ira looked up at the face of her mysterious savior and discovered something familiar in his expression. She confirmed it wasn't a dream. It was the man she had been looking for her entire existence. The bully started shouting at the girl's savior, calling him a bastard, completely beside himself. He exclaimed that they had set their eyes on that woman first, and that no one dared interrupt their fun. The protagonist decided to handle that situation first. She knew those men and their tricks very well. Ira told her savior that she herself would deal with those thugs, thanking him for his help, and smiling confidently. She gathered her courage when the guy started insulting her. She wouldn't let anyone humiliate her anymore. Smack! A loud slap echoed in the air, leaving everyone speechless and astonished. The bully's black mask flew off, and tension was palpable in the atmosphere. This was getting out of control. If Ira was just anyone, he was equally guilty. Both were looking for a simple fleeting encounter. Didn't we both come looking for a night of passion without ties? The protagonist asked. What did you expect? Sir Knive was petrified upon hearing his name, realizing the situation was more complex. Being engaged to the crown prince, Ira was supposed to know the guard knights and their personalities, especially those guarding the prince, who knew more than anyone about his affairs in the kingdom. The three men were stunned. How did she know all that? They understood nothing. The heroine smiled and asked, "How is your highness? Are you worried about me right now?" Ira suggested chatting a bit. She needed to know more about her ex, more than ever. Sir Nive replied, somewhat confused, that unfortunately he knew nothing about what was happening in the kingdom. The thugs turned around, admitting their mistake and promising a radical change in their conduct. The protagonist murmured that finally peace reigned, and she could focus on her plans and ramblings. The knight captain asked if it was common for the lady to get involved in this kind of trouble. Ira confessed that she made a big mistake yesterday and promised to be more careful when choosing friends and acquaintances. The captain's gaze instantly darkened. Those were not the words he longed to hear. The protagonist thanked the man, assuring him that thanks to him everything turned out well, and she felt better. She removed her mask and asked why the stranger disappeared in the morning. Did she expect to see him again? The man replied distantly that he did not understand what the lady was referring to and preferred to leave it forgot. The protagonist placed her hand on her savior's collarbone, stating that he was lying, because he also remembered everything. She admitted that she tremendously wished to see him again, but didn't know how to do it without drawing too much attention. Ira declared that she forgot to thank the man for his company and hoped he wouldn't be offended by her carelessness. The knight captain touched the young lady's hand, saying there was nothing to thank him for, since he couldn't act differently. Then, the man withdrew the beautiful lady's hands from him and observed her, understanding the feelings she had for him. He said sadly in his voice that to her, he was nothing more than a simple one-night pastime. And nothing more than that. A silence fell between the young people, and each thought about how their destiny had intertwined in that way at that moment. The next day arrived, and Ira understood that she had to sort out her thoughts before an important event at the palace. Casper, her personal maid, begged on behalf of the head maid for her mistress to behave appropriately at today's party. However, at that moment, the protagonist was absorbed in her own thoughts and didn't listen to her maid at all. The personal maid asked annoyed if her mistress was listening to her or had gotten lost in her thoughts. Ira didn't understand why she had to go to the palace today, with her head elsewhere, thinking of someone else. There will be a banquet at the palace for the victory against the monsters, and everyone expects to see the heroine among the guests. This will be the heroine's first visit to the palace since that fateful day when she left it. Yesterday, she discovered that that stranger can cure her terrible illness, and that impacted her to the core. It seems to activate upon touching his hand, and now Ira cannot forget this fact. Never. The heroine decided that she must try something else and hopes to have luck in her next actions. She made another mistake and doesn't know how to fix the situation with the stranger who has captivated her so much. The young woman longs to see that man again and talk to him about what torments her so much now. The scene shifts to the royal palace, where all the guests gathered for a crucial event. They couldn't believe that the rumors about that lady were true, and that she would actually show up at the party. Such a lady was a disgrace to royalty, and many pleaded that she not show herself before everyone. The protagonist repeated to herself that she must be patient. These were trifles compared to her life trials. The emperor ordered Marquis Byron and the knights to be brought to the event, and everyone awaited their arrival. The mentioned person bowed, imploring them to accept his infinite gratitude for the opportunity to be there. Rose Byron greeted His Majesty with respect and reverence, aware of the importance of the moment for the crown. The protagonist was astonished to see a familiar figure among the guests, and her heart beat strongly. It was that man with golden eyes who had become her symbol of hope and strength in her lowest hours. Now, Ira had truly found her sleeping pill and understood that he could change everything around her forever. Their reunion after 25 years was something unusual for everyone present at that event. Liam Cloyka greeted the Count, highlighting his great victory for the Empire and its people. Rose Byron replied that he only fulfilled his duty to the Emperor and his nation in these difficult times. There was a time when he was captain of the Royal Guard and a loyal servant to the Emperor, serving him with devotion. But after the death of the first prince, the Emperor granted him some abandoned lands in the north. Surprising everyone, the leader of the Empire appointed the Imperial Swordbearer as the new Lord of the North and baptized those lands, marking a milestone. Liam Cloyka ordered the Marquis to win the war against the monsters, crucial for the country's security. All the aristocrats knew perfectly well that this was nothing more than an exile to faraway lands. The northern lands, without divine protection, were plagued by monsters, a true hell for the knights. The emperor knew about the death of 3 of the count's sons in that war, something that had devastated him internally. Liam Cloyka de News expressed his regret, confessing to having also lost his firstborn. Rose Byron proclaimed that her sons died for the empire, with bravery, and their memory will last eternally. The emperor asserted that excessive loyalty is a poison and can bring about dire consequences. He promised a worthy burial and not to forget the feats of the knights sacrificed for the homeland. Count Byron revealed that, as a reward, he only had one request for his imperial majesty. He announced his wish to adopt Captain River, leader of the Byron Knights and an exemplary man. Upon birth, every aristocrat received the temple's blessing and was inscribed in the Book of Imperial Nobility. The adoption also required the emperor's permission to respect the rules and ancestral traditions. Captain River, leader of the Byron Knights, greeted His Majesty with respect. Aware of the situation, the protagonist finally discovered the name of the man she so longed for, and whom she had thought about so much. She was very happy. She feared not being able to find him among so many people gathered in the place. But now Ira understood that the captain of the knights had to return to the north, and the news took her by surprise. River had no surname, which meant he was a commoner, something that deeply amazed everyone around him. The captain of the knights revealed that, thanks to the count, he could wield a sword and serve the empire. Something crucial, River confessed that he lost his parents during a monster attack, and this left an indelible scar on his soul. The emperor commented that hearing something like that in the middle of a war was unusual, but it had still happened. He proclaimed that he must fulfill the request for those fallen for the empire, who gave their lives for the homeland. The leader of the empire called the butler, who awaited instructions, ready to carry out all orders. Liam Cloyka de News stamped the seal in the Book of Nobility next to River Byron's name. A crucial moment, the emperor declared that he permitted Count Byron to adopt River, a decision made with his blessing. Immediately following, Liam Cloyka de News bestowed the surname Byron upon the captain of the knights, a symbol of a new beginning. The count and River thanked His Majesty, aware of how crucial this instant was for their future and destiny. The protagonist understood that she had to leave, as she did not wish to see the displeased face of a certain person nearby. She fervently wished for everything to turn out well, despite the adversities that might arise on the path ahead. Ira turned upon hearing someone suddenly call her, something unexpected that put her on slight alert. The protagonist apologized to her uncle for the delay, as she was unaware he was already there. Waiting for her, the father of the crown princess, Baron Edis Anton, said there was no need for formalities. They had more than enough of those. The man deduced that Ira's father was still sick, and this worried him, and made him worry about his family. The Baron informed that, had he told her sooner, his niece would not have had to come at such a delicate moment. Edis Anton expressed his regret for not being able to help in anything, being the head of the family, and the fundamental pillar of everyone. The protagonist expressed her disagreement, stating that her uncle helped her enormously, despite his own problems. The man asked if his niece would be willing to become the crown princess's lady-in-waiting. Ira's blood froze upon hearing such words from her own uncle. Edis Anton, with a cunning smile, reminded her that they were family and must support each other in difficult times. The protagonist could not believe her uncle wanted her to become the princess's servant. The story now takes place in a hall where 2 men are seated, facing each other, discussing crucial matters. The emperor confessed that he felt relieved as soon as the count returned, and that this gave him hope. He added that he had been constantly worried about having treated him wrongly and not knowing how to fix it, and not knowing how to amend it. This was because the emperor could have sent another knight to the north, but he decided to entrust the mission to the count. Count Byron replied that he was simply fulfilling his lord's will and was not seeking glory for himself. The emperor knew very well that this man had never been afraid to get his hands dirty for the good of the empire. His Majesty hoped that the count's son would be like his father and a loyal servant. Rose recounted that River spent his whole life in the war, forging his spirit and character. The knight captain was loyal to the empire like no one else, and always ready to fight for its honor. The emperor laughed and said they should first teach River the life of an aristocrat. He should not feel inferior because of his origin, and that was crucial for his future. The emperor suggested to the count that, before returning, he look for a fiancée for the captain, to consolidate his position. If he married a noble lady, he would gain the trust of aristocrats and friends of the empire. The emperor promised to help find a worthy bride. River should not have unnecessary connections in the future. In the year 957 of the imperial calendar, a new prophecy arose in the Cloica Empire. The prophecy would occur the day the roar of the golden lion shook the skies, an omen of great events. Just then, the lost star will fall from the sky to the earth, and its fall will mark a before and an after for the people of the empire. That year in the Goldwyn Mansion, 2 girls were born, destined to change the fate of their families and of the entire empire. Ada Goldwyn, the Duchess's daughter, who died after childbirth, was destined for a great destiny and an epic love. And also Judith Anton, daughter of Baron Anton from a minor branch, was overshadowed by her more famous rival. The entire empire trusted that this was the omen about the heroine and her vital role in the kingdom's future. Ira prepared for her destiny since birth, but her heart was filled with fear for what awaited her. At age 10, she was engaged to Crown Prince Alberto Cloica Zeus, marking the start of her torturous path to happiness. The protagonist, every year, stood beside him at the empire's foundation festival, feeling terribly lonely. Even then, Ira understood that to Alberto she was just an inanimate object, and that she was incapable of loving him. The little girl cried to her father, telling him she didn't want to go to the party and that she feared meeting the prince. Ira confessed to her father that she fears the crown prince and doesn't know how to deal with that dread. The aristocrat calmed the girl, saying that Zeus's blood ran through the prince's veins, and girls don't interest him. Everything had to change after the wedding, because right then everything would become clear and destiny would be sealed once and for all. For right then, the crown prince would finally come to know true love, and they would become the ideal couple for the empire. But on their wedding night, the changes only affected the protagonist, and she understood that everything had gone terribly wrong. At that precise moment, Ira's world completely collapsed, and she understood that she had lost everything she loved. When they threw the girl out of the palace, next to Albert was her, Judith Anton. She looked at Ada and smiled, as if she were happy about her pain and humiliation. It was rumored that now, His Highness had finally found his beloved and had performed the sealing ritual with her. It must have hurt Lady Judith greatly, as all the glory was taken by Lady Ada, leaving her in the shadow. It was rumored that the Goldwyn family bastard had fled to a village, where no one knew or looked for her. After the engagement broke, Ira stopped appearing in society and locked herself away in her family mansion. When her father fell ill, the vassals began to discuss who would be the regent in this difficult moment. They proposed that Baron Anton assume that burden, as he was the father of the current crown princess. The vassals promised to help the man in this matter, as they had done before. When difficulties arose, the Baron declared that he would do everything possible not to dishonor the family, as his honor was the most important thing. Thus, the protagonist's uncle became regent of the Goldwyn family, without her or her father's consent. What affliction! Ira did not understand why she had not noticed the contemptuous look with which the man observed her before. The Baron smiled widely and told the young woman that he was only joking, but she didn't believe a single word. The father of the crown princess confessed that his daughter felt a little lonely in that empty property. A man saw Duke Schultz and announced he had to leave. Business called him. In the great temple, the protagonist's father lay on a bed in one of the rooms. Ira was by his side, asking what to do. She felt completely lost. After her breakup with the prince, her father assured her that he was sure Ira was his daughter. The man promised he would find a way to prove it and restore Ira's honor. No matter what, the high priest entered the room and noticed there was another person there. Well, he asked if he was interrupting, since the young woman seemed lost in thought. What moment? He remarked that his lordship looked better than on previous days, something that made everyone happy. Ira froze when the high priest mentioned that thanks to Baron Anton, the clinic improved. It is rumored that the Baron throws money around uncontrollably, not caring about the consequences. What madness! They say Baron Anton is much more generous than Duke Goldwyn, and that amazes everyone. Ira knew instantly that her uncle does not have that money, so he is spending his family's funds. The high priest asked worriedly if the lady was well, and if she needed help with this. The protagonist, smiling, told the man that it was time and that she would visit him again later. Ira began to blame herself for having so easily yielded the administration of the estate to her uncle, and that weighed heavily on her. When she returned to the estate, After learning about her father's condition, everything had changed a long time ago. And it was different. Many new servants appeared in the house, and the vassals pushed her away from the affairs, which greatly distressed Ira. Ira could only lie in an empty room and suffer from a headache that would not cease. The protagonist understood that if she did nothing, her uncle would snatch the estate from her. And everything. To begin with, the young woman decided to get rid of insomnia and the headache to live normally again. The pain was unbearable for Ira. She only longed for it to end at once. The protagonist closed her eyes tightly, not noticing the worried figure approaching. A familiar voice interrupted the silence, asking what she was doing there and if she needed help. River, visibly uneasy, asked if she had been drinking at the temple and how she felt now. The man supposed that something hurt her and suggested she rest a little, at least for now. The protagonist did not expect to find him at the temple. What a surprise! This was very strange. Ira thought that maybe he had gone to ask the high priest for permission for an adoption. The young woman felt that luck was on her side. She couldn't believe it. Happiness overwhelmed her. River panicked upon seeing the Lady Goldwyn collapse. He didn't know what to do. How horrible. The captain held her arm to prevent the fall and help her. Responsibility flooded him. The protagonist felt that the headache had disappeared. She felt relieved and sighed. At that instant, she understood that she had to get River to end the pain. And act boldly. To do this, Ira had to keep that man by her side at all costs. It was absolutely necessary. The protagonist moved away and looked into the eyes of the knight captain, seeking support and understanding. River said he would call a priest immediately. He needed to help the girl and could not delay. The protagonist grabbed the man's hand and asked him to wait. She needed to explain everything and calm down. Ira was not ready to talk about her headache, so she said she didn't want to cause a scene. She mentioned that her father was receiving treatment at the temple, and she didn't want to bother the priests. The man did not agree. He felt the girl needed help, but he didn't know what to do. The protagonist told him that he had already helped her when she was about to faint. Something very important. River was speechless before the young woman. Confusion overwhelmed him, and he remained silent, not knowing how to act. Ira thanked the man for saving her from that humiliation, feeling relieved and deeply grateful. The protagonist noticed that the man always helped her in difficult moments, and that meant a lot to her. River deduced that the lady had recognized him in the crowd, which unsettled him a bit. Feeling the tension, Ira smiled and said that everyone knew the man after the victory celebration. And it was true, everyone talked about him. He was the war hero who had saved the North from the monsters, and was now a famous figure throughout the empire. Tomorrow, the man's name will resonate throughout the empire. Everyone will talk about his feat and admire him for a long time. For a commoner to become the adopted son of an aristocrat was unusual, and a surprising fact for everyone. River interpreted this as a warning not to irritate the nobles, something important to always remember. And for everyone, the protagonist moved closer to the man and asked him to consider this as a kind of important advice for him now. She added that she wished to reward the man for his kindness and concern for her. River Byron blushed instantly due to such closeness with his lady, not knowing how to react. Later, both men greeted High Priest Amadeus, who was known to both of them. He greeted the Count with a smile, saying they hadn't seen each other in a long time and missed each other. Rose Byron apologized for not arriving sooner and not being able to meet with his friends. The High Priest grumpily called the Count, telling him he greatly missed his old friend. Amadeus noted that Rose had always been loyal to the Cloic Empire and devoted to the god Genius. The High Priest expressed his hope that the adopted son would follow in his footsteps and be worthy. River must be as loyal and devoted as his predecessors in this matter, without hesitating for a second. The knight captain's eyes opened wide, looking astonished at the high priest. Amadeus was blessed by River in the name of the eternal sun, the god Genius, something crucial for him. The priest named the knight captain River Byron and pronounced it with great respect. Now the man's name was inscribed on the list of noble citizens of the Cloic Empire. The ceremony was simple, so River thought Lady Goldwyn was right in her words. A little earlier, the knight captain said he didn't need the lady's help. He was independent. Ira declared in an icy voice that in the Cloic Empire, origin and lineage are everything. No one would openly oppose River once the emperor himself gave his consent, but the nobility would try to harm the man behind his majesty's back. It was obvious to everyone. Marquis Byron could also be a victim of the aristocrats if they decided to act again. River was sure. I doubt anyone wants to make an enemy of the emperor's friend now. The protagonist announced that only the marquis would be treated as an equal among all the aristocrats present. The wind blew even stronger, carrying away Ira's words, addressed to the newly named aristocrat at that moment. If the lady was right, the temple and the emperor really would not protect them from their adversaries. Full of rage, the knight captain clenched his hand into a fist, feeling his emotions completely overwhelm him. Ada proposed discussing this tomorrow in Twinville to discuss all the details and future plans. Now River had no choice but to follow the will of Lady Goldwyn and her valuable recommendations. That night, the rain did not cease, creating an atmosphere of unease and uncertainty around them. Threatening, the protagonist's black mask fell to the ground and lay there, evoking her murky past and her hidden secrets. River decided to do it, even if it meant becoming the lady's plaything for one night. Nothing more. The father of the crown princess, during dinner, said that Ira had lately been coming home late, and that worried him. The man heard that the young woman spent a lot of time at the temple lately, with her father. The uncle asked if his brother had regained consciousness. This is crucial for everyone and worries him greatly. With a forced smile, the protagonist said her father was still unconscious, which saddened her enormously. Ada explained that during her visit, the high priest appeared, so she had to stay a little longer. The father of the crown princess was surprised to hear about the high priest and his visit today. Edis Anton promised that he would certainly convey the Goldwyn family's gratitude to the man. The protagonist immediately understood that her uncle was referring to the donations, and this began to worry her. The temporary administrator of the family had no right to dispose of the assets without the head's permission. It is a strict rule, but the young woman's uncle was spending money recklessly, not caring about the future of his family or her interests. This means either the vassals support him, or the man is appropriating the money, which is unacceptable. The uncle mentioned that he had heard his niece chatting for a long time with Sir River, and that worried him quite a bit. The protagonist knew perfectly well that she could not afford to fail at the beginning. The entire plan was at stake. Ada recalled the conversation with the knight captain from a few hours ago, and now his words were turning over in her mind. The protagonist asked if something bothered the man, because it was crucial for their relationship at that moment. In 25 years of war against monsters, the emperor never sent reinforcements to the north. A real shame. When the war hero returned, they didn't even organize a worthy reception for him. A total injustice for everyone. The only reward for the victory was the captain's promotion and a noble title, something clearly insufficient. River downplayed the matter, saying he didn't understand politics and frankly didn't care right now. He was convinced that those people knew perfectly well how to act in that situation. And what was most correct? The emperor was lenient, but security was his #1 priority, and he always made that very clear. After the death of the previous emperor in the revolt, the current leader does not want a powerful army. That is why aid to the north will be minimal, more of a show than real support. What audacity! River commented that the lady seeks to make him doubt the emperor, but he will not fall into that trap. The protagonist smiled and retorted that he is free to think whatever he wants, but she will not change her mind. Ira promised her help, as she only wishes the best for him and hopes for his support. How noble! The protagonist's uncle lamented that they hadn't dined together lately. What sadness! He asked if her company displeased him, when she had always been so friendly. What insolence! The protagonist smiled and said she felt unwell, but she would not fail to be courteous. How diplomatic! Marcella Anton, wife of Baron Anton, declared she was fed up with the same thing and demanded a change. Edis tried to reply, but she, irritated, questioned whether he had said something incorrect, and offended him. The Baroness said that insignificant person always complains about her health, but runs to Twinville at night. Ira froze when the woman claimed that the girl goes there to sleep with men, and that shocked her. Marcella Anton confessed that she is already ashamed in front of the other ladies, as everyone knows about Ira's escapades and her conduct. The eldest son of Baron Anton, Lionel Anton, with a smile, confirmed his mother's words, and fully agreed. The Baron, disappointed, asked where the world was going, if such a depraved place was popular among young aristocrats. His Majesty did not approve of visits to such establishments, so the eldest son must always be very cautious. The Baroness supported her husband's words, saying that Lionel should not draw too much attention. and should stay in the shadows. The woman added that she fervently hoped Ira had also understood everything and drew conclusions from what is happening around her. She reported that the young woman should not embarrass her family and should behave according to her status in society. The protagonist forced a smile and said she had understood everything, although in reality that did not please her at all. The next day, the Goldwyn's personal doctor, one Anglesey, prescribed the lady a potent analgesic to calm her pain. Ira asked if her uncle had told anyone anything important about her condition or about how she really felt. The physician reported that his lordship wished for his niece to get better as soon as possible and return to her activities. The man put on his hat and added that they would see each other at the next checkup to discuss her health in more detail. Ira knew she shouldn't tell the doctor that the medicine wasn't working and that she continued to suffer every day that passed. Normally, the young woman endured the headache by taking several pills, but now she had River by her side. What a relief! The protagonist supposed she would no longer need this medicine. Things were changing in her favor. Finally, now, if River had to accept her proposal for the plan to be set in motion, she couldn't fail now. The maid was in shock when her lady declared she wanted to go to Twinville again. That was truly unexpected. Casper reminded her that the Baroness had scolded her the day before for spending too much time away from home lately. Ira's personal maid pleaded, unable to keep pretending to be her night after night. It was exhausting. The protagonist delicately took Casper's hand, trying to calm her with her sudden kindness. Would it work? Ira explained that she had a crucial meeting and could not afford to look bad. Her image was paramount. She promised her maid not to go out at night again and to try hard to rest. Could she keep her promise? Then, the protagonist begged Casper to help her get ready. She had to be irresistible today, no matter the cost. The maid felt curious. What kind of meeting was so important? Who would be present at it? Ira planned to use all her feminine charm so that River could not refuse her proposal. It was her only option. The events take place in the lands of Count Byron, where the knights were training hard. River noticed that the soldiers were in excellent spirits, despite the adversities. An admirable spirit, they seemed more motivated than ever, instilling hope in their commanders and allies. Morale was high. The captain's subordinate replied that the Lord did not think so. The knights not only won this long war, but the emperor granted them an audience. For the soldiers of the empire, there was no greater honor than this meeting with His Majesty. Their fate could change, and His Majesty gladly agreed to Lord Rose Byron's request. No one expected this. This unprecedented decision marked a milestone in the history of the Cloak Empire. The knights were proud and full of hope, but River remembered the words of the blonde Lady Goldwyn, which made him reflect on the future of his nation. The crimson-haired young woman confessed that she had become distressed, seeing that supplies were not arriving on time. She thought the imperial family had abandoned them to their fate, but she soon realized that was not the case. The emperor even promised to take care of the families of the fallen and do everything possible for them. The young woman was happy to be able to give good news to their families and restore their hope for a better future. River did not deny that the emperor promised them a reward, but it was only an empty promise. One of the captains announced a 10-minute break for the warriors so they could relax and concentrate. The new aristocrat tried to convince himself that everything would turn out well, but anxiety consumed him inside. River believed he had to do everything possible for the North, because the fate of his people was in his hands. But then he exclaimed that 2,000 gold coins were a mockery, when his annual budget was 4,000. Rose Byron asked her adopted son to calm down, not to be carried away by panic, and keep a cool head. The Baron showed the knight captain His Majesty's decision, where everything was clearly written. Memories of his soldiers, happily receiving a reward from the emperor, began to parade through River's mind. His gaze saddened, because nothing was going as he wanted, and hopes faded with each passing day. River bowed and begged his lordship to reconsider his decision, hoping for the best for his people. The knight captain, with palpable sadness, said that the families of the fallen should not suffer from hunger too. He begged his father to give them at least food and resources to rebuild, to support those who were left helpless. River looked into his lord's eyes, icy as winter, and understood that he was not going to change his mind. He remembered every one of the words that young woman with golden hair had told him. River finally convinced himself that Lady Goldwyn was right. The emperor did not want the reconstruction of the North. It was obvious. Outside, the rain fell torrentially, and the cold drops hit the ground like celestial tears reflecting their mood. The venue was full of masked people, whispering plans and dreaming of a different world. River was also there, awaiting the young woman's arrival, longing for an encounter that could change everything. He froze upon hearing a familiar voice behind him, a voice that accelerated his heartbeat intensely. The protagonist asked the man if he had been waiting long for her. River told Mrs. Goldwyn that he had just arrived at the place, and his heart raced with excitement. Ada noticed that the man had acquired everything necessary for the imminent meeting, and that pleased her. The young woman explained that she was referring to the mask, which suited the knight captain wonderfully. River replied that he knew that in that establishment, wearing masks was an unwritten rule. The protagonist added that some aristocrats attended the place without wearing any mask. For example, those who had recently arrived and had nothing to hide from those present in the hall. Ada took River by the hand and suggested they talk about the matter elsewhere, where no one could hear them. There were too many curious glances around, and they ran the risk of someone overhearing their conversation. The protagonist guided the dark-haired man down the hallway, and he felt strange in her company. River didn't understand why his heart was beating so fast. If he had only gone there for a business negotiation, Ira stopped, affirming that it was the perfect place for a sincere talk between them. She took off her mask and suggested that the captain wanted to tell her something, but didn't dare. River nodded mentally, as he had come to accept Lady Goldwyn's proposal to collaborate. The man remembered that the lady had offered to help the North. That's why he needed to know what help exactly meant for his people in the North. The protagonist supposed that the Goldwyn mansion already knew about His Majesty's decision. Now, all that was left was to convince this man to accept her terms and support her plans. Ira revealed that in the Goldwyn lands, they harvest 3 times a year, which gives them stable income. She informed that, if the man agreed to collaborate, she in return would supply resources to the North. The protagonist added that she has a lot of money because she belongs to a ducal family and knows its worth. If Ira manages to regain her position as head of the family, everything will be much easier. The young woman announced that, to start, she will return to high society, the best place to get information, and expand her influence. River reminded her that right now, the lady is in the eye of the storm. Ira told him that she is perfectly aware of the rumors circulating about her. That is precisely why she needed River's merits and fame as a war hero. The man was the idol and hope of the common people, so not even the aristocrats could ignore him. At the start of the social season, River will be the center of attention at the palace ball. The protagonist asked him to present her as his companion. At that very moment, a man in a dark cloak knocked on a wooden door. The healer poked his head out, greeted his lordship, and told him he was waiting for him. The crown princess's father knew that today was Ira's scheduled checkup. The doctor reported that he had added what the lord requested to the young woman's medicine. Inglesi was sure that the result would not be long in coming, because the lady takes all her medicines. Edis Anton declared that it was excellent news, as Ira was supposed to die very soon. The crown princess's father ordered the doctor to give her this medicine next time, because now the time had come to finish off his brother's daughter. The events continued to unfold in the Empress's chambers. The woman reported that the social season would begin soon, and everyone is preparing for this grand event. Judith Anton arrived at the palace almost at the same time as the preparations for the ball began. Empress Serbian Kloika Schultz stated that time flies, as a year has already passed since their meeting. The crown princess received the list of aristocrats for the ball and examined it carefully. It was time for Judith to learn how to manage the inner palace. It required special skills. The Empress told her that if she had problems, she should ask Mrs. Oakland for help. Judith was a lot of work. Ada understood the Empress perfectly and helped her with everything. The princess asked if they should invite the Goldwyns to avoid unnecessary suspicion. Serbian Kloika Schultz said she was asking too much. She needed to calm down a bit. Judith Anton apologized for her silliness. She didn't want to seem nosy or too curious. She explained that she was only referring to whether Lady Goldwyn could attend the ball or not. The Empress went to the window and said sadly that Ira would not attend that night. Meanwhile, the protagonist was chatting with River in the hallway. The man concluded that the lady planned to use him to regain her position as family leader. The girl uses the shipments to the north as a pretext to achieve her goals and consolidate her power. The protagonist did not understand why she felt exposed, as if he could now see her true intentions. Utilization was the only word describing the relationship between the two young people at that precise moment. Ira wanted so much to convince the man that now she felt she had gone too far with her words. River did not understand why someone with such a tempting offer had such a strange expression. The man stated that the lady's proposal was truly beneficial for him and his people in the north. He explained that he feared the crown prince's anger, as the young woman was close to him, and it could displease him. The protagonist, with an icy tone, informed him that he would not meddle in her affairs or hinder her. Ira was sure that for the Empire's prince, she was nobody and would not influence his decisions. She touched River's hair and told him to only think about those he must protect. They both bet what was most precious, so they couldn't fail in any way. River supposed that people might wonder why they are together. The protagonist announced that they would simply say it was love at first sight. The most beautiful woman in the Empire enchanted an innocent knight, unaware of the social world. River pushed a lock of hair away from the lady and whispered to her that that could turn against her. The protagonist clung to the knight captain's arm and asked what his answer was. River felt the girl's gaze burning him, while he could not quench his thirst. He did not understand at all why he couldn't push this aristocrat away. The knight captain replied that he agreed and leaned close to Ada's face. The next instant, the man's lips devoured the protagonist's lips. The next day, noble ladies commented that Lady Goldwyn had returned to Twinville. This time, the young woman was accompanied by Sir River, who recently joined the Byron family. Many witnessed the kiss between the young people. It gave the impression that Lady Goldwyn did not care about her family's reputation. The Baroness returned to the mansion and exclaimed that Ira had completely lost her mind. The woman, indignant, asked if the girl wasn't satisfied with loitering around Twin Bell. Marcella raised her hand and, furious, asked how the girl could have fun so blatantly with men. At that moment, the protagonist felt her cheek burn after the blow. Ira understood that it was time to move to the next phase of the plan. The protagonist apologized in a low voice to her aunt, confessing to being head over heels in love with someone. She shouldn't have acted like that for Her Highness, the Crown Princess. For her uncles, it was totally unacceptable. Ira begged her aunt to help her atone for her sin, sending her to serve in Montegras to amend her mistakes. That place was a shelter for the poor and sick, located on the outskirts of the capital. An undesirable fate. Beggars and the sick constantly arrived, ending up dying of hunger and lack of care. For the Baroness, it was a stroke of luck that Ira wanted to voluntarily go to that hole, even if temporarily. The woman informed her that she would write to Montegras, and in the meantime, she could pack and prepare for the trip. Marcella suggested that the young woman remain there until the end of the social season, to avoid attracting attention. If Ira showed repentance, no one would dare judge her for her past actions. The protagonist timidly asked if her aunt really believed that could work in her case. The Baroness promised that as soon as Ira returned, everything would go back to how it was before, and they would fix it together. Immediately afterward, Marcella Anton left the room, slamming the door shut, and leaving Ira alone with her plans. The protagonist smiled and adjusted her hair, feeling a slight tingle at the impending changes. Astutely, she murmured that she truly wished her aunt's words would come true, and her life would improve again. From the note, the man understood that his mistress had got into trouble again, and this required immediate action. He was curious to know who Ira's new love was this time. How intriguing. The servant cautiously asked if his master was perhaps returning to the Empire's capital again. The man replied that if he disappeared for too long, his mistress might forget him and start a new life without him. In the Imperial Palace, the man stopped and commented that Twinville had been agitated lately, causing unrest. Albert begged the gentleman not to anger the emperor, as he could lose his position, and that would affect everyone. Edis Byron assured that he already took action so that this never happens again. The crown prince placed a hand on the gentleman's shoulder and told him that seemed fine to him. He added that too many eyes are watching them, and that forces them to be cautious. Very cautious, Albert asked his grandfather, Duke Rabian Schultz, to help the gentleman, a newcomer to the council. The crown prince smiled when asking them not to embarrass him, and everyone nodded in agreement. In the council, the imperial servants greeted His Majesty, and everyone stood up. Respectfully, the emperor announced that they would proceed to debate crucial matters, vital for the entire empire. Liam Cloyka Genius unrolled the parchment and read the first item. Of great importance to the region, The emperor will discuss the issue of irrigation works in the West with Duke Lindman upon his return. Retired Marquis Hugh Cunningham informed the leader, "It is time to talk about the northern expenses." His Majesty ruled that, in his opinion, this matter is settled and admits no further debate. At the previous meeting, only the amount of compensation for the victory was debated, and unleashed a storm. The war ended, but the northern inhabitants continued living among ruins, crying out for state aid. The emperor recalled that the irrigation works in the West demand an enormous investment, and we are short of funds. Ethis Byron raised his hand and declared that there is a solution, a single way to solve everything, and benefit us all. To lift up the region, willing hands are required, capable of facing the colossal tasks that await. The emperor inquired if the crown princess's father had any proposal, a brilliant idea that would save us. The count suggested repatriating the northerners scattered across different territories so they can rebuild their own land. The north could not take in all the war orphans, so the temple and other fiefdoms sheltered them under their mantle. Now it is time to reap the rewards, because 25 years is a long period and demands infinite patience from everyone. The children who lost their parents in the war are now adults looking for their place in the world. If we choose among them those who have skills or resources, we could help the North recover. But this method had its limitations, and that generated doubts among some of those present. Edis Anton reported that he had other proposals that could be useful for the region's reconstruction. The crown prince froze when the gentleman suggested investigating Twinville. Could it change the empire? There, every night, a large casino and auctions attracted crowds of people and investors. However, nobody knew who the owner was, and that sparked suspicion among authorities and citizens. We must see if Twinville pays taxes and doesn't launder money. It could be a danger to everyone. The emperor smiled and said he had heard that name a lot lately and was interested in its fate. He assigned the case to the crown prince, and the Ministry of Finance had to support the investigation. And so the meeting ended. Albert clenched his fists, aware of the seriousness of the situation and its consequences. Shortly after, the group arrived at the Montegras orphanage, a crucial place for many needy people. An orphanage employee greeted the lady, saying they were eagerly awaiting her, and they were counting on her help. Ira smiled and said the trip was good, as the orphanage was quite close to where she lived. The woman introduced herself as Eli and said she had been managing Montegras since last spring and loved her job. Immediately after, the protagonist introduced herself and stressed that she was happy to be there and to help whoever needed it. The orphanage was created by the temple to assist the homeless and the sick. But after the war against the monsters, the number of homeless people skyrocketed, and the temple could not maintain it alone. Therefore, the priests began to rely on donations from the aristocrats to provide assistance and support. Montegras was financed by the Goldwyn family, and the Duke donated generously every year to help those in need. He made sure the money was used correctly, not for personal use, vital for everyone. That's why no one went hungry in Montegras. Help arrived unfailingly. Only a year ago. What happened here? Why such a drastic change? Ira didn't understand. The stench of death filled the air, the crying of hungry children, bitterness and terror everywhere. The protagonist asked, "Why are the sick lying on the floor without medical attention?" Ellie revealed that, following the Duke's illness, the Goldwyns stopped sending donations. The woman was stunned to realize that the lady was unaware of all this. She thanked the lady confusedly for her constant help, for never abandoning them. The heroine suspects, did the priests appropriate the donations and are now shamelessly lying to her? Ira will return to the mansion soon. There is no point in lying. The truth will come to light. The Goldwyn vassals couldn't just stop paying donations like that. Her uncle was involved. The protagonist assumed that Edis Byron and the butler Siles appropriated the funds and hid it. The girl remembered that her uncle brought Siles to the estate and quickly gained the trust of the family and friends. Ada took a necklace out of her pocket and asked Ellie to use it to heal the sickest. She also asked them to feed the hungry, necessary for people to regain strength. Ellie's eyes shone with joy, and she thanked her mistress for her generosity and willingness to help. The servant asked if the lady really wanted to stay and help the poor at the orphanage. The protagonist smiled and revealed that they had to meet someone there, a mysterious character. Ellie led the girls to a room where high society ladies used to stay. Peace and tranquility reigned in that place, and from here, the most beautiful sunset in Montegras can be seen. Something unforgettable, The protagonist was petrified for a moment by such beauty. The manager, with a warm smile, added that it was not a ducal mansion, but it was quite comfortable. Ira decided to ask if there were still aristocrats coming to help the poor. It turns out that, after the cessation of donations, the situation had worsened significantly. But sometimes they do come, Ellie replied with an enigmatic smile. The servants hastily unloaded all of Lady Goldwyn's belongings. As soon as he finished, Caspar returned to his lady's room. He informed her that he had personally accompanied all the servants to the wagon. And they fled. They didn't even say when they would come back for her, as if they had no intention of ever returning. Ira knew instantly that her uncle did not want her to return. At first, she thought it was a misunderstanding. He was her only relative. But over time, she noticed more things that confirmed her suspicions. For example, her uncle's cold gaze and her father's belongings disappearing, and the administrator position that he occupied almost immediately, stealthily. And that report that the protagonist found today in the office, Ira prepared it during the council meeting, looking for something before leaving for Montegras. The protagonist was sure there had to be a clue somewhere. Her eyes widened as she began examining another document. It was a strange report, different from those of the duchy, and the sum was enormous. If they paid such a fortune, they surely bought a lot, or perhaps luxury items. Ira decided to investigate where all that money went. Seeing his lady so thoughtful, Caspar sensed that something was troubling her, so he decided to urgently change the subject. The young woman began to inspect the room happily, and confessed that she had even started to worry when her lady decided to come to this place. She surely has a plan, because the lady wouldn't come here for nothing. And boy, does she have one. The protagonist revealed to her personal maid that, in reality, this is a place for secret meetings of noble ladies. Caspar exclaimed immediately, asking what all that meant. She didn't understand what her lady was plotting this time. Many aristocrats come to Montegras to atone for their sins, like ladies with dubious reputations. They help the poor and sick, and fervently pray to the god Zeus. That a noble aristocrat lives in this horrible place proves their sincerity. But it was just rumors circulating among the nobility. Montegras received donations from the duchy for years, abundant food, and priests to care for the sick. There was no work for volunteers, so the aristocrats started having secret dates here. Caspar didn't understand anything, as he had never heard about this. Ira explained that nobles don't talk about that, and Montegras is far away, perfect for hiding. The protagonist concluded that the priests knew this perfectly well. Caspar wondered how his mistress had that information. The lady said she heard about it in Twin Vale, but the protagonist wondered who could have told her. That man is not a simple person, knowing such things. And that intrigued Lady Goldwyn. She didn't understand why he had revealed that information to her. That same night, the protagonist covered herself with a cloak and left to execute her plan in the darkness. That man from Twinville possessed very valuable information. He knew whom to find where and how to influence them, precisely. Shortly after, Ira found what she needed. The girl wanted to approach without being seen, but a branch treacherously cracked under her feet. Ira got scared. She couldn't allow herself to be discovered. Suddenly, someone hugged her from behind. A familiar voice begged the lady not to be scared. River, with a hint of guilt, tried to explain that he couldn't act otherwise. The protagonist couldn't believe seeing that man there. 2 days ago, in Twinville, the guard captain asked her what her plan was. To start, Ira needs to get an invitation to the palace ball. Her aunt doesn't want her to go, so she must steal the invitation before she destroys it. And additionally, Era needs to find an escort. That is, a high society lady to accompany her to the event. Because officially, Era is not yet married. The crown prince wanted to annul the marriage, not divorce, but it doesn't matter to her. If Era shows up at the ball, everyone will want to make her miserable and humiliate her. The imperial family, her uncles, no one will defend her. She is alone. A stranger suggested visiting Montegras and looking for Madame Chesterfield if she wanted to get everything back. Now Ira has to check it for herself. She has no other choice. River urged her to leave as soon as possible. They had to avoid being discovered. She moved away a little, and he froze when their eyes met. So much tension. Immediately, he backed away sharply a few steps. He was nervous. River apologized instantly, explaining that he was just trying to hide them. Pure precaution. Ira tried to calm him down. The situation was truly dangerous. Besides, they have already done much worse things. But he still blushes after this. Ira, with a warm smile, told the captain that he had to get used to contact, since, according to rumors, they are lovers. He simply has to behave like in Twinville. When River looked at her, heat immediately flooded him. That day, he kissed her without thinking twice, as if trying to quench a thirst impossible to calm with water, longing to devour the girl completely. River felt that this is how it should have been from the beginning. He didn't understand why he always lost control beside her and couldn't get rid of that feeling. Perhaps the hero came here to find an answer. But River knew perfectly well that thinking about it was useless, since Lady Goldwyn didn't care at all. He turned around and suggested to the lady that they leave. This is only a temporary visit, and as soon as the contract ends, River can return to the north. The protagonist noticed that River was a bit quiet today. She wondered why the captain was already here, since he was supposed to arrive tomorrow morning. It turned out that the man accidentally saw Lady Goldwyn while walking towards the forest. That's why River followed her, because he supposed she might need some of his help. The captain asked if it was that person she had talked about before. The protagonist replied that she wasn't sure yet, since she had only seen his back. But soon they would know the truth. The next day, Ira greeted the manager. Ellie thanked the lady for her help, and then recounted that the previous night, an important guest had arrived, whom she had surely heard about before. The manager introduced Mr. River Byron. The protagonist revealed that she had seen him from afar at the victory celebration. She smiled warmly, greeted the man, and introduced herself. River, like a true gentleman, kissed Mrs. Goldwyn's hand and introduced himself in turn. It turns out that Mr. River came to support the inhabitants of the north. In reality, Ira and River agreed to pretend they didn't know each other, as rumors had not yet reached Montegras. Ellie told the captain that the lady planned to stay here for a while, and asked how long he planned to stay. River replied that he wanted to examine the patients and return in a few days, as he still had a lot to see there. The manager proposed continuing the conversation after the service, and said goodbye to our heroes. Shortly after, the protagonist could observe all the parishioners who, like her, had attended the service. He probably hasn't arrived yet. As if sensing something, Ira turned abruptly upon hearing light footsteps behind her. The protagonist finally managed to find the walking etiquette manual, Countess Lilia Chesterfield. This woman is an idol for many ladies. The only daughter of Count Chesterfield, she always distinguished herself by her impeccable manners. All young women dreamed of having her as an etiquette teacher before their debut in high society. Her fame soon reached the Empress herself, and Lilia Chesterfield became the protagonist's etiquette teacher to prepare her for her debut and the title of Empress. So Ira met her, and now she saw her in that place. What a twist! The protagonist didn't understand. Were that man's words true? Was the Countess cheating on her husband? But considering the Count's family situation, it's not that surprising either. There were no male heirs in the Chesterfield family. The previous Count, seeking to secure his daughter's future, ceded the title to her fiancé ahead of time. The newly appointed Count deeply loved his wife and was said to be the best husband. But everything changed after the tragic death of the previous Count and his wife in an accident. Rumors began circulating that Count Chesterfield was obsessed with his mistress, and he even brought her home. They even have a son, and now the Count plans to name him his heir. Lilia couldn't believe her husband had waited for her father's death. How horrible! Upon learning this, Countess Chesterfield fainted from the shock. After this, the Countess disappeared from social life, and then we found out she had fled the capital. She even refused to be Judith's etiquette tutor at the request of the Empress herself, claiming illness, but Ira didn't understand why she was in Montegras and why the Count had hidden it. We must act cautiously, because our protagonist doesn't have much time left. As soon as the ceremony ended and everyone started dispersing, Ira called Countess Chesterfield. She told her that, had she known she was in Montegras, she would have visited her immediately. Without hesitation, with a radiant smile, Lilia greeted Lady Goldwyn, explaining that she couldn't receive her yesterday. The woman, truthfully, didn't look very well, so perhaps she really was sick. The protagonist felt relieved that their paths had finally crossed. She asked the madam if she could visit her from time to chat, and Lilia agreed with a smile. The woman tried to say something, but the manager suddenly interrupted her upon noticing that the heroines already knew each other. So she decided to introduce the rest of the guests. The first thing Ellie did was introduce Sir Byron to Countess de Chesterfield, and then she introduced Sir River, explaining that he had just returned from the war in the north. In reality, the manager had never seen the Countess so kind to anyone as she was being to Lady Goldwyn. The protagonist revealed that the Countess had been her etiquette teacher. Thanks to her, the young lady's social debut was a complete success. Lilia added, with a warm smile, that Lady Goldwyn had always been a very diligent student, but she was curious to know what Lady was doing in Montegras currently. The protagonist already had the answer ready for that question. She came here to pray, as her father has been unconscious for half a year. It's not entirely a lie. It's just that the girl has another reason to be here. If she helps those who are here, perhaps God will hear her prayers. The protagonist's words moved the two women. The Countess took the lady's hand and promised that God would hear her. If Ire feels lonely, Lilia asks her to come visit and they will chat. The protagonist sincerely thanked the lady. Days after that meeting, the Countess became less distant with Ire. As she had predicted, she saw a version of herself in the protagonist and opened up. Maybe everything is due to that conversation. Ire remembered when the manager left and asked the Countess what she wanted to tell her. It turns out Lilia heard footsteps in the hallway the night before. That's why she asked Ire if something similar had happened to her, but the protagonist smiled and replied that she hadn't heard anything, because she went to bed early the previous night. The Countess assumed she had simply imagined it, so she asked the lady to forget about it. After that conversation, the Countess did not go out at night again. The protagonist understood perfectly. That woman still mistrusted her, so she would have to observe a little longer. Life in Montegras wasn't proving too difficult after all. Every morning after the service, the heroines distributed food to the poor, and after lunch, they toured the wards caring for the sick. The priests were mainly in charge of treatment, and they, along with the Countess, simply encouraged them or helped with whatever was necessary. But the priests were always surprised to see the aristocrats in the wards. They were not used to aristocrats caring about the sick, and it showed on their faces. Ellie called the aristocrats and blessed them with divine power. The protagonist immediately felt relief. She proposed to the manager to sew more clothes for the patients, as they would be better off wearing clean garments. But Ellie replied that Montegras did not have money for it. Then, the protagonist promised to make a donation. The manager rejoiced instantly, exclaiming that Lady Goldwyn was a gift from God himself. Ire asked them to contact her if they needed anything, or to send word through her maid. They went out to the street, and the protagonist looked towards the cabin in the distance. The aristocrat stopped dead when a man emerged from among the bushes. The protagonist wondered what the priest Jezwael was doing there. The manager supposed that the man was probably in the garden, collecting medicinal herbs. She told them that they personally grew the herbs they often used, as they did not have enough priests. And it turns out that priest Jezwael is responsible for the medicinal herb garden. The manager began pulling out one plant after another, explaining which one helped heal wounds. She placed special emphasis on a very dangerous herb. If not used correctly, it could induce a coma. The protagonist asked if she could take a look at that garden. Entry is forbidden to outsiders, but Father Jezwael can make an exception for noble ladies. However, the man calmly replied that he had to leave, as he still had to take medicine to the sick. The manager explained that although Father Jezwael is quiet, he is a very good person, and very devoted. That same night, Ada and River hid among the bushes again. The protagonist already doubted that the Countess would come, as she comes here every day, but there are no results. She decided to ask Sir River if he thought that man was not a priest, but the commander could not answer with certainty. The man asked the lady if she really wanted to set up an ambush that could cause her trouble, but Ira replied that in that case, she would blackmail him. This answer surprised River, as he believed she had a special relationship with the Countess. But that's why the protagonist initially decided to try to convince her the easy way. The captain decided to ask if it was mandatory for them to hold hands every time. Due to the darkness, the girl did not see how much her face flushed. And River's ears. The protagonist reminded him that, in order not to look awkward in public, they had to get used to those touches. And then she brought River's hand to her lips. Ira said they should hold hands with Sir River for the ball, but partly it was for herself. In recent days, her headache disappeared because she started holding Sir River's hand frequently. But during the day, her head still started to hurt, so she needs to see him regularly. But the protagonist could not force him to stay in Montegras. Suddenly, she thought of suggesting to Sir River that he learn some etiquette while he was there. He will surely be the center of attention at the ball, and all the aristocrats will watch him closely, so he had better prepare. River thanked her for the offer but refused it, claiming he was a simple gentleman. But Ira reminded him that, at the same time, he was also the only heir to the Byron family. In the north, during the war against the monsters, Count Byron lost his entire family, including children and his beloved wife. At the award ceremony, Sir River was officially recognized as the heir to the Byron family. But to be accepted in high society, it's not enough, as the man must still get rid of his commoner image. In appearance, he fits, as he is a war hero, and River also has no problems with swordsmanship. All that remains is to change his rough appearance, and he will be ready to conquer society. The history of the Cloak Empire recounts a commoner knight who became chancellor. That position was only for aristocrats, but he was so exceptional that even the crown recognized him. His descendants founded the Cunningham Duchy, and no one dares to look down on them for their commoner ancestor. In high society, the most powerful weapon is image, so you must know how to use it. Now, River urgently needs to behave like an aristocrat so that no one dares to humiliate him. But the man had no idea how to achieve it in such a short time. What a dilemma. The protagonist brought a finger to her lips, signaling silence with a gesture. Because the Empire's best etiquette teacher was currently heading towards the cabin with Father Giswale. The next day, the seamstress Madame Fever greeted the lady, saying it was an honor to work with her. The protagonist returned the greeting with grace and courtesy. Madame Fever brought the dress sketches and recalled that the lady had another order for other nobles. Ira wished they would sew clothes for the patients. It had to be light, comfortable, breathable, and durable, so that it could be washed frequently. The lady also ordered 2 dresses, so Madame Fever asked if she planned to wear both outfits. But the protagonist replied negatively, as the second dress is meant for someone else. Ira promised the seamstress to give more details later, and the woman did not insist. Then, the protagonist approached the countess and greeted her. With a smile on her face, she asked her to spare her a couple of minutes. Over a cup of tea, Ira told the countess that they had invited the nobles to sew hospital gowns. Lilia informed the lady that, thanks to her, the patient's situation was beginning to improve. The protagonist thanked the lady and admitted she was very worried about whether she could be useful there. The young lady is still not sure how long she can stay in that place, but until the situation in Montegras improves, she would like to stay there and monitor the situation. Lilia supposed that this place would miss the young lady after her departure, but the woman agreed with the young lady's statement that there are quite a few volunteers now. Volunteers, not only Lady Goldwyn, but also Lord River, although he will leave in 3 days. From the young lady's face, the countess noticed that something was tormenting her. The protagonist, with sadness in her voice, confessed that lately she was starting to feel like everything was going wrong. Perhaps the countess does not know, but some time ago she faced great sorrow. His Highness, the Crown Prince, decided to break off the engagement, and the drama exploded. Rumors that Lady Goldwyn was illegitimate spread. Her father fell into a coma. Her uncle temporarily took charge, but without her father, she could not stay there. It is shameful to admit, but Ira was completely devastated and lost. But pay attention, the heroine has been invited to the imperial ball itself. The countess knew instantly that they were talking about Lord River. Ira confirmed it. In the midst of her doubts, fate willed that they meet. He suggested they go to the imperial ball together, but her aunt strongly opposed it. Although in the end, Ira thought it was all her fault. Maybe, after all, it was better not to know anything. If only she could go back to the past. When none of this happened, maybe she could change something. But now it is absolutely impossible. The countess thought to herself that this lady had matured enormously, although she still saw her as a child. Lilia decided to offer her help to the lady. An expression of astonishment appeared on the protagonist's face. She simply couldn't believe her plan was working so easily. Ira confessed that before coming to Montegras, she was very anxious and felt she was overstepping too much. But apparently, a god took pity on her and brought her to the countess. So, if Madame becomes her escort, she can attend the imperial ball along with Sir River. Ada was sure that this would not be enough. After all, the countess had even refused the empress. But surprisingly, Lilia agreed and revealed that she was precisely thinking of returning to high society. The protagonist couldn't believe Madame accepted. If she had refused the empress herself. Ira had no idea that Lilia was hearing this for the first time. Now the countess had one more reason to return to high society as soon as possible. She insisted that the lady take her to the empress. This way she would have an excuse to go to the ball. Ira did not know the details, but apparently the countess was in a delicate situation. Then, the person who told her about Montegris already knew what was happening, or nothing would have been resolved so easily. The protagonist asked the lady if they could meet that same night to take the measurements for the dresses. Ira asked Madame Fever that the design of the future dress resemble Lord River's image, so that the rumors surrounding her would not tarnish her heroic, pure, and noble image. Madame Fever understood everything and began taking Mrs. Chesterfield's measurements. As soon as everything was ready, the seamstress promised to notify Lady Goldwyn as soon as the sketch was finished. With the dress matter resolved, Lilia asked what was next. In the remaining time, the protagonist planned to teach Lord River the rules of protocol so he wouldn't embarrass himself. To do this, she will have to meet him in secret, avoiding her uncle's gaze. The Countess asked the lady not to worry, as she was willing to help her with that problem. The next day, Lilia asked Ellie to take advantage of the period of incessant prayer to protect herself from rumors. Since it was a request from Lady Goldwyn, the manager approved the idea. It seems things are starting to get better. So time passed, and the day came when River had to leave Montegras. Luckily, the protagonist managed to leave that place in secret, but she didn't understand that strange combination. Her with River, Countess Lilia, and Father Giswale. At that very instant, Caspar was posing as Lady Goldwyn and wished his lady would return soon. Anton informed Baron Edis that the lady had withdrawn for a period of constant prayer. During that period, one eats and sleeps poorly, easily ruining one's health. So, if the young lady suddenly faints, no one will suspect anything. The Baron informed Anglesey that he must soon go to Montegras to support Ira and help heal patients. The healer accepted his lord's assignment. Ira surely weakened during the prayers, so she must be prescribed a vitamin complex. At the same time, River informed his father that they discovered there are northerners affected by the war in Montegras. Right now, they urgently need help. The Count received the report, but still didn't understand how those unexpected guests had appeared. River reported that he met Countess Chesterfield in Montegras, and she expressed her desire to teach him etiquette. The protagonist explained to the Count that Countess Chesterfield urgently needed help. For the ball, they will have to practice dancing, but her health did not allow her to be a suitable partner. Since the Countess was worried about her health, the temple sent Father Jessul with them. With a tired voice, Rose Byron asked to ensure that unnecessary rumors about this did not spread. She asked the butler to escort the guests to their rooms immediately. Everyone left, and now River was left alone with the Count. The tension was palpable. Rose asked her son what those ideas were. Since he hadn't told her, he wanted to go to Montegras to meet Lady Goldwyn. Before, he showed no interest in women, but suddenly, he invites Lady Goldwyn. So there must be a hidden reason. The Count had not heard everything, but warned River that his relationship with Lady Goldwyn would not benefit his reputation. However, River was determined to show his father that this deal was advantageous. Soon he showed the advance he received from the lady and revealed that, if the deal was successful, she would provide more funds. Moreover, the lady promised to send supplies to the north. The Count said that it was too large a sum for an ordinary deal, which could end up in a difficult situation. But River recalled that the reward promised by His Majesty for victory had not yet arrived. Even if it arrived, that money would not cover all the needs of the North, and River was not going to stand idly by while the North collapsed. If the Count accepted him into his lineage, he is now also part of the Byron family, and he is obliged to protect the North. But River was going to do it his way. And with that, the man took his leave with a bow. In the end, what His Majesty feared happened. River's encounter with Lady Goldwyn. It is impossible to avoid meeting whom destiny has reserved for you. The first dance lesson would soon begin. River kept wondering why his father seemed so worried at that moment. Lost in thought, the man didn't realize he was stepping on the lady's dress. He apologized immediately, but Ira reassured him. The Countess noticed that the young ones were still not focused, so she proposed a short break, and she left the room. Ira asked Sir River, somewhat annoyed, why he was so tense. In the eyes of others, they must look like a couple. The protagonist approached the man and told him that even the Countess had left them alone. River pushed the lady away, saying he didn't expect the Countess to support his plan, but he was curious to know how she had managed it. The protagonist remembered when she told the Countess her feelings and blushed intensely. River even started to worry about the lady's silence. The protagonist, embarrassed, begged him not to ask, because she felt a little ashamed to recall it. But now the man was even more interested in knowing what the lady had told him. Ira stepped back, but accidentally snagged her dress. She instantly felt herself losing balance, so she closed her eyes at the imminent fall. But Lord River skillfully held her by the waist. Their gazes met, and both their hearts began to beat fast. The man asked the lady if she was all right. The protagonist replied that she was fine. And right at that moment, Countess Chesterfield returned to the room. Ira immediately moved away from River, somewhat rushed. Lilia instantly noticed the awkward atmosphere reigning between the young people. Since they had rested, the woman proposed returning to training. Now they need to gently hold hands and look deeply into each other's eyes. Lord River starts with his left foot forward, and the lady steps back with her right. At first, Ira thought it was just nervousness, but now everything is fine, although her heart still hasn't calmed down. From that day on, the young people agreed to practice once every 2 days. Under the pretext of supporting the northern inhabitants in Montegras, a carriage will depart from the county. While Ira is at Count Byron's mansion, Mrs. Fever visited them to prepare Lord River's outfit. The Countess supposed the young lady is worried about the ball, but asked her not to fret so much, because Lord River will adapt faster than she thinks. It seems he was born for high society, and that greatly delighted the protagonist. After the balls, he should learn other high society traditions. Ira's worries were in vain, because now everything is running smoothly. Finally, they arrived at Montegras. Looking out the window, the protagonist glimpsed her family's personal physician. Along with a priest, her eyes widened in surprise. Anglesey reported that he urgently needed to meet Lady Goldwyn. She suffers from a chronic illness and must take her medication. The Baron is really worried, but the priestess replied that right now, the lady is in a period of constant prayer. Not even the clerics can approach her at this time, so the young lady cannot help in any way. Then the healer began rummaging in his satchel. He pulled out a small vial and begged that they at least take this medicine while he checked on the sick. Inglesey simply could not leave the lady alone. The priestess agreed to hand over the medicine and then opened the doors and allowed the healer to enter. The man entered immediately, and the doors slammed shut. After this, the protagonist rushed out of the carriage. Casper was in the room, praying nonstop, desperate. Joy flooded her when the door burst open. Lady Goldwyn was there, calling her. Ira was worried about her maid, but the girl assured her she was fine. She was very resilient. The protagonist promised that she would only be absent every 2 days, and they would take turns praying. And then she whispered the bombshell. Anglesey is in Montegras. Casper was left speechless by such news. Ira begged her to be extremely cautious. She might run into him on the street. In reality, the heroine thought that the immersion in constant prayer would calm her uncle. But it seems he is plotting something. Maybe he did it on purpose, to watch her. Ira doesn't understand her uncle's plans, and she must prepare for everything. Most likely, her time is running out. She has to find proof of his corruption as soon as possible. She needs someone to help her inside and outside the mansion. And one name comes to mind. Joseph. She refers to the former butler of the Goldwyn family. Ira asks Casper how she could contact him. Casper reflects and tells her that they usually turn to expert informants, and she has heard that they do that in Twinville. Only then does Casper realize she has put her foot in her mouth. But the protagonist had already engraved that information in her memory and promised the maid to be discreet this time. Joseph was a man who had served the Goldwyn family since the time of the previous duke. Not only was he loyal to the family, but his work was impeccable, so the estate was running smoothly. But when Ira returned to the capital, Joseph had disappeared, and someone named Sales was taking his place. Then, the protagonist went to her uncle, who revealed that the former butler was stealing family funds. Ira could not believe what she was hearing. Although her uncle claimed it, the stolen money never showed up. Back then, the protagonist couldn't investigate, but now she was intrigued by the whereabouts of that money. If she hadn't left for her domains, the young lady could have prevented Joseph's dismissal. Suddenly, a male voice beside her asked Ira what she was thinking about. The stranger kissed the lady's hand, saying he knew she would come. The man led the protagonist to his office, without further delay. As soon as he removed the mask, Ira recognized him instantly. It turns out to be Duke Frederick Lindman, who invited her to sit down with a smile. Ira was sure he was mistaken, as they weren't that close. No way. But Frederick approached and replied no, there was no possible mistake. The protagonist froze when he suddenly pulled off her hood. Meanwhile, the Duke revealed that she met Countess Chesterfield thanks to him. He insisted, asking if she was pretending not to remember. What audacity! The protagonist didn't understand. Could it be that he revealed the whereabouts of Countess Chesterfield to her? She didn't know why the Duke helped her, but begged him not to think they had gotten close after one night. The man took Ira by surprise when he assured her that it hadn't just been one night. The protagonist couldn't comprehend. Had they met before? Frederick leaned down and asked the lady how many times she thought they had met. In Ira's mind, a whirlwind of memory fragments assaulted her. The young lady held her head, and the man asked if she felt unwell. Ada replied that she was fine, and explained that she came to ask him to find someone important. She referred to the former butler of the Goldwyn family, named Joseph. She asked how long the search would take. Suddenly, Frederick said the lady must get ready. They were leaving instantly. In the blink of an eye, the carriage was ready and waiting. The protagonist couldn't believe that the capital hid such a place, plagued by thugs. And destitute, the young lady began to doubt whether Joseph would really be there. But her eyes widened when one of the ruffians shouted that they needed money. In a dark alley, 3 thugs were beating an old man, threatening him with sharp weapons. The protagonist, without hesitation, demanded that the carriage stop, because she had finally managed to find Joseph. But Frederick held her arm, warning her that if she got out now, she might bitterly regret it. However, the protagonist ignored the Duke and ran to rescue Joseph. Ira approached the bandits and indignantly asked what the hell was going on. If they needed money, she was willing to give it to them, just to make those ruffians leave. But instead, they targeted her. They thought they would get more out of her. Ira exclaimed they would regret it if they dared touch her. A sword was instantly placed at the neck of one of the bandits. Frederick reminded her that he had already warned her that she might regret her decision. The thugs furiously asked who she thought she was, and instantly, the protagonist witnessed a bloody massacre with her own eyes. Without the slightest effort, the Duke finished off all the undesirables. The protagonist immediately ran towards Joseph. With tears in her eyes, the girl began to apologize to her former butler for not having come for so long. But suddenly, Joseph replied that he was fine and that the lady should not worry so much about it. He apologized to his lady and left. Sitting in the carriage, the young lady kept wondering why Joseph had rejected her help. From thinking so much, her head started to hurt again. Frederick noticed it and asked if it was happening again. This man knew too much about Ira, and she didn't want to show her weakness, so she replied that she was fine. The protagonist asked the Duke not to tell anyone what had happened today. And also, Ira asked him to forget her request and the place where she had been, asking him to consider it part of their deal. As soon as the carriage arrived, Frederick reminded the lady that she could always count on his help. The protagonist said nothing and went to the room. Right at the entrance, Casper received her, who immediately noticed that something was happening to her lady. Ira asked for a painkiller, and the maid instantly put her hand in her pocket. And then she pulled out a small vial containing the medicine the priest had given her. Without thinking twice, Ira took out a pill while Casper poured water into a glass. She extended the glass to her lady, and she thanked her for the gesture. The protagonist swallowed the pill immediately. Casper advised her lady to rest a little there, since getting to the room would be difficult for now. And then the maid left the room. The protagonist immediately felt intense discomfort and sudden dizziness. The symptoms worsened every second, and the young woman slowly collapsed to the floor. A short time later, Casper returned to the room. On the floor, she saw her mistress unconscious and was instantly scared to death. The priests, who arrived quickly, administered first aid to the protagonist. But the lady didn't wake up, and the administrator deduced it wasn't simple fatigue. She asked if the lady had eaten anything unusual, and Casper remembered she took a pain pill. Priest Jeswael asked to take a look at them, and immediately concluded that it contained poison. This was impossible, as the medicine was given to the maid by the Gullwyn's personal doctor. He wasn't acting alone, so Casper instantly knew that Baron Anton was involved in this. They immediately reassured her, assuring her that the lady would recover without fail. It wasn't long before they informed Baron Edis Anton that the young lady lost consciousness after taking the medicine. The healer did not witness it, but he noticed the sudden hustle of the priests. If Ira fainted due to exhausting prayers, the temple had to compensate the Baron. News from Montegres also reached young Master River very soon. It was through a letter, no less. It detailed Lady Gullwyn's current condition. River ordered his subordinates to continue training, while he immediately left for another place. Anguish, despair, and a sliver of hope tormented the man on his way to Montegres. Without the slightest reservation, he burst into the lady's room suddenly. The Countess suggested to the administrator that they be left alone, and Ellie did not object. Until that moment, River didn't believe the lady had fainted, so he rushed to Montegra's. Seeing her unconscious, the fear of losing her revealed that he fell in love instantly. That's why he desperately implored her to wake up. Suddenly, Ira's body began to shine with an intense golden light. A few weeks later, the time for the Grand Imperial Ball arrived. At it, Sir River of the Viren family and Lady Ira of the Goldwyn family were announced as guests. Subsequently, the arrival of Countess Lilia of the Chesterfield family was announced. Madame immediately went to the couple to welcome them. The ladies assumed that Lady Goldwyn chose a novice to annoy Madame Chesterfield. Like the protagonist of a novel, her partner captured all the attention, but she asked River to go in. The stares of her relatives were suffocating her. Weeks ago, following Lord Byron's pleas, the protagonist finally woke up. The man immediately asked if anything hurt, as she had been unconscious. Just in case, he decided to call the priests and Madame Chesterfield. The protagonist felt like her body was lighter, but Sir River remained worried. The last thing Ira remembered was taking a pill for a headache in the chapel. After that, nothing. Soon the room filled with people, and Countess Chesterfield said she was looking for an antidote. Ira asked Casper if those pills could contain poison. With tears in her eyes, the girl revealed that Lord Anglesey had given them to her, and she never imagined something like this would happen. Anglesey clearly couldn't have done this alone, so Ada theorized it was an order from her uncle. River entered the room with a tray in his hands. Ellie immediately approached and asked how the lady managed to recover so quickly from such a potent poison. The man recounted that he just took the lady's hand, and suddenly, her body shone with a golden light. Then, he placed the tray on a chair and informed the young lady that he had brought water especially for her. There are less than 2 weeks until the ball, and the preparations are not yet finished. River wouldn't mind training, but he perfectly understood that it was now crucial for the lady to rest well. However, she felt perfectly fine. The protagonist began to get out of bed, proposing to Sir River to go to the training hall right now. No one tried to dissuade the lady, and River silently followed his mistress. A few days later, Baron Edis Anton arrived in Montegra's. He prided himself that Ira chose to stay voluntarily in such a miserable place and help any riffraff, but now he needed to punish those who had brought her to this state. At the entrance, his lordship the Baron was received by a priest. He led the gentleman to the living room and asked him to wait a moment, as the priest would arrive soon. The wait was not long, and soon another man entered the room. The Baron's eyes widened in surprise. At the door was the completely healthy protagonist, who greeted her uncle with a smile. She felt curious to know why he was so pale, as if he had seen a ghost. Edis didn't understand how it was possible, and began to think that Anglesey had betrayed him. But if Ira was fine, he could leave. However, the protagonist decided to tell her uncle that she would attend the next imperial ball. The Baron could not forbid his niece from doing that, but he still decided to tell the girl that he had not received any invitation from the imperial family. Nevertheless, Ira asked her uncle not to worry about it, as she already had a plan to achieve it. In reality, Edis thought that silly girl would be calmly at home, but suddenly he decided to go to the ball. The man was sure of one thing: he would embarrass her in front of everyone. The Anton family was indignant, so the eldest son decided to speak personally with his cousin. So he headed straight for Ira. The protagonist, annoyed, asked him why he was looking for her. Lionel was stunned when that brazen girl demanded that he speak quickly and not waste her time. The hero informed her that she had broken a promise, since, initially, she herself said she would live quietly in Montegra's until the end of the social season. But in the end, she embarrassed the family again. However, Ira calmly explained that her aunt had simply proposed she spend the rest of the social season in Montegra's. But she couldn't stay there, as restlessness consumed her. Ada saw no reason why she should listen to her brother's reproaches, since she hadn't broken any promises. Lionel couldn't help himself and started shouting that he hadn't even received an invitation to the ball, but that she went to the ball with a commoner gentleman and with Madame Chesterfield, who abandoned her husband and fled. Ada was not going to tolerate insults towards her acquaintances, so she ordered Lionel to apologize to them immediately. Baron Anton intervened in the conflict and apologized for his son's stupidity. He begged them not to take Lionel's words to heart, but now the Baron planned to have a serious talk with Lionel at the mansion. River leaned towards the lady and asked if she had provoked her cousin on purpose. The ladies murmured that Lady Goldwyn was very different from the rumors. She was really intelligent. The music started, indicating it was time for the couples to dance. Looking at the crown prince, Ira noticed a smile on his face, one she never saw when they were together. For some reason, she remembered that day again. Suddenly, River touched the lady's hand. At that moment, the protagonist felt complete calm. She pulled the man by the hand and proposed he join the dance too. River was a bit nervous, but Ira calmed him down, reminding him that they had practiced a lot for this. He felt it, agreeing with her words. The man carefully took the lady by the waist, and they began to twirl to the rhythm of the music. The protagonist thanked Lord Byron for the help provided. River looked surprised, and Ada explained she meant that he had held her hand minutes before. For some reason, she felt calm when she held River's hand, and the headache also disappeared. The dark-haired man was happy to hear that. Ada asked if the stares of the people bothered him, and River replied that he was already used to that. All the ball guests admired the couple. River will undoubtedly receive heaps of letters from admirers, and will have to answer each one personally, or his reputation will be affected. The protagonist chose Sir River well. He is handsome, noble, and everyone admires him. But she must not depend only on him. Era needs to find new allies this social season. The Emperor and Empress were watching the entire ball. Longing and sadness could be seen in Serbian's eyes. She watched Lady Goldwyn and Lord Byron, who were obviously enjoying each other's company. Liam asked his wife if she was still worried about the crown princess. She had been looking for an etiquette teacher for so long, so the Emperor reached that conclusion. After observing her, in reality, the woman feared not living up to expectations, as this is her first appearance as crown princess. But it seems she was mistaken, and the Emperor decided that the etiquette teacher did not have to be Count Chesterfield's wife. Liam did not expect the Countess to come as Lady Goldwyn's escort after refusing the Empress. What a twist! The Empress explained that the Countess had delicate health, and Lady Goldwyn knew the protocol well. She just needed company. Liam realized that his wife had always cared a lot about Lady Goldwyn. A touching detail. With a sad smile, Servian replied that it was true. The truth hurts. In fact, she feared that Ira couldn't manage, but it seems she recovered. A pleasant surprise. Or she is simply pretending too well. Suspicious. When the ball ended, the Countess asked the lady if she planned to return to the Goldwyn mansion. But the protagonist replied that she was more comfortable there, and asked Madame's opinion on the matter. Lilia could not answer, because the administrator of Montegras approached them. Dramatic interruption. Ellie approached the young lady, and politely asked her to step aside for a moment. The Countess announced that, in that case, she would go to her room, and the administrator showed the lady the way. Following Ellie, the blonde girl wondered if something had happened again in Montegras. Perhaps now the administrator would ask for money again. Ellie led the protagonist to a room, and Era immediately asked if something urgent had happened. The administrator replied that everything was fine, only that she wanted to know something. Perhaps this question seems quite unexpected, but Ellie asked the lady if she had headaches and trouble sleeping. The protagonist didn't understand how she knew. She had always hidden her pain. And since she arrived here, she hadn't had severe pain thanks to Sir River. Instead of answering, Era asked why she was asking. The administrator apologized to the lady if the question had offended her. It was simply something that worried her. The protagonist perfectly understood that, whatever it was, she must not tell Ellie about her illness. Era replied that, after her father got sick, she had felt unwell. But that passed quickly, and now she has no health problems. The administrator, guiltily, admitted that she just heard that the lady wasn't feeling very well, and she started to worry a little. In that case, Ellie could leave peacefully, but the protagonist still didn't understand how she found out she had health problems. Possibly, Baron Anton had something to do with it. A few days later, the protagonist received a huge amount of invitations to various events. Casper noticed that her mistress had been sleeping well lately, and her skin tone had also improved quite a bit. Although Ada hasn't seen Sir River since the ball, at least her headaches disappeared. If things continue like this, she won't have to see him so often. But for some reason, the protagonist doesn't want that. Ada was itching with curiosity. How would Madame Chesterfield react to those letters? She's surely in her room. Suddenly, Casper dropped the bombshell. Madame left Montegras this morning. It turns out Count Chesterfield suddenly felt the need to see her. They say he hadn't contacted her since she arrived in Montegras. But suddenly he rushed. Ada knew very well what it was like to be in a house where no one supports you, so she hoped everything would turn out well. The Countess, sitting in the carriage, reread the letter over and over. It said that Count Chesterfield had seen her at the ball, so she was already recovered, and she could return home soon. The Countess asked the coachman to slow down. She explained this request by saying she got dizzy after a long time without traveling. However, the woman finally arrived at the Chesterfield mansion. The butler welcomed the lady. Clutching the edge of her dress, Lilia mentally ordered herself not to be afraid, as she might run into him. The maids began to whisper upon seeing Countess Chesterfield. Another woman came out to meet Lilia. It was Vera Blackwood, who was currently Count Chesterfield's mistress. Vera, of course, had heard that the Count invited her, but she didn't think the Countess would actually come, so she didn't even prepare for it. Lilia asked indifferently where the Count was. The mistress looked at a maid and ordered her to take the lady to him. In the Countess's absence, Vera surely became the mistress of this house. Of course, it is also her fault, as she fled cowardly. The maid knocked on the door of his lordship Count Chesterfield's office and announced that Mrs. Chesterfield had arrived. The Count received Madame with a warm smile. She probably received his letter this morning and came right away, which means she accepts the proposal. He thought everything through, as Vera was having a very hard time without the Countess, having to fulfill all her duties. The Count promised to prepare Lilia's room, but unexpectedly, the Countess refused. For some reason, he misunderstood the reason for her visit, as Lilia did not return to live with him as before. She is the legitimate heiress of the Chesterfield family, and he obtained this title only thanks to his marriage to her. The Count tried to touch the woman's shoulder, but she brusquely rejected him, showing the seriousness of her intentions. Now, Lilia is determined to correct this mistake, regaining her title no matter what. In other words, their marriage is over. Definitely over. Days later, during tea, the ladies were commenting that Countess Chesterfield had requested a divorce. Because of the title at stake, this divorce promises to be a pitched battle. The young women decided to ask Lady Goldwyn if she knew details, since she had been with the Countess at the ball. But the protagonist, with an enigmatic smile, replied that they were not exactly intimate. In reality, she was also surprised, as she always believed Lilia to be shy. But if she dared to commit betrayal and divorce, what a surprise. The noblewoman confessed that she was surprised not only that Lady Ira went to the ball with the Countess, but also her escort that night. The lady with pink hair asked, intrigued, if perhaps they had met in Twinville. The protagonist nodded, believing it was public knowledge information. Sir River and the Countess of Chesterfield are her benefactors, as they helped her in her worst moment. After the meeting in Twinville, the young woman stayed in contact with Lord Byron. The protagonist, slightly blushing, asked if they hadn't felt that fate united them. The redhead became curious and proposed to the gentleman to go to the ball together. And the protagonist revealed that it was Sir River who suggested it to her. River argued that he hadn't been out in a long time, so he would accompany her so she could be calm. Lord Byron accepted despite the nervousness his first ball caused him. Suddenly, Ira realized she was talking too much about him and felt embarrassed. The protagonist was glad to have attended Lady Richmond's party. She has a good relationship with the Gullwings and loves gossip, so she will surely tell everyone about her romance with River. Ada boasted a little, but she must maintain her noble image. It is the only way to return to high society, and her uncle will no longer be able to harm her. The protagonist's headache has returned. Again, after that fainting spell, she felt fine without Sir River, so she relaxed a little, but now she urgently needs to visit him. Time is pressing. A little later, on the training field of the Byron mansion, Sir River could not concentrate on training, because he couldn't stop thinking about Lady Goldwyn, her beautiful eyes, and her wonderful smile. River even thought he saw her nearby, and when her voice called him, he thought he was hallucinating. The protagonist, astonished, asked what he meant. River shouted in fright. He no longer understood anything. Was it not his imagination this time, and everything was real? It seemed to Air that the man looked distressed, as if he hadn't expected to see her there. River immediately replied that he didn't expect her visit, and the girl burst out laughing. It was a joke. Approaching, the protagonist told him she needed help, asking River for a little of his time. The man's face lit up again. He instantly turned around and invited her inside. The protagonists went to the drawing room, and soon the maid brought an aromatic tea, placing it on the table. The protagonist thanked the maid and asked her to leave her alone with Sir River. The man assumed she was looking for help with something that needed to remain secret. Surprisingly, the young woman replied that it was not so. She simply knew that Sir River would be more comfortable without prying ears. After taking a sip of tea, the young woman asked him if he had chosen it himself. However, Sir River clumsily replied that he didn't understand teas. In reality, the protagonist thought it suited him wonderfully. If he had other guests sometime, Ira advised him to offer them tea. Sir River asked the lady what she wanted to talk to him about. The protagonist told him that after the ball at the palace, she had received many invitations, but some parties could be attended with a partner, and Ira wanted to ask Sir River to accompany her. The lady had no special request. She just wanted River to pretend to be her lover, as he had done before. Of course, Ada promised to reward the man, as their agreement was not yet closed. She didn't even imagine that River would have fulfilled her request without a reward. Therefore, he agreed to grant her request. Soon, all the newspapers were talking about Lady Goldwyn and the commoner gentleman, who were often seen on dates. People began to think that the scandalous lady was trying to return to high society. Headlines even started appearing that they had already secretly become engaged. Everything went according to the protagonist's plan, although the rumors about the engagement were a bit exaggerated. Suddenly, Casper burst into the room. She showed the lady today's newspaper and, in a panic, announced the disaster. It turns out it was talking about the secret encounters of Countess Chesterfield herself. Casper didn't understand where the hell those rumors had come from. The protagonist realized that her maid knew nothing. Hence the surprise. Ira asked if Madame already knew, but Casper had no idea. She hadn't seen her for so long. The protagonist thought, could it be Count Chesterfield's doing? That he knew everything from the beginning. If Madame has problems, Ira will have them too. But the young woman scolded herself for being selfish. Better not to tell the Countess anything. So the protagonist asked Casper to keep silent. The maid nodded, and the protagonist gave her permission to leave. Shortly after, Ada attended another event with River. From now on, all aristocrats fervently discussed the latest rumors. The protagonist decided to ask her companion if he had heard anything about the recent gossip. The man replied that it was difficult not to hear about such things, but he didn't understand what it was all about. As far as River knew, Count Chesterfield also had a mistress. But why was everyone accusing the Countess now? That surprised Ira, but she still replied that for aristocratic men, having a mistress was quite normal. For example, if there are no children in the marriage, the law does not prohibit having lovers. But if a married woman meets with another man, that is considered a crime. In that case, River didn't understand why the lady did that, knowing the consequences there would be. Reacting, the man immediately added that he was not accusing her at all. He was just interested in knowing why Countess Chesterfield did that. With an enigmatic smile, Ada decreed that Sir River was right. I was only thinking about how to silence the scandal, but perhaps there is another way. As soon as night fell, the young woman left for where the Madame was. Lilia opened the door instantly and allowed Lady Goldwyn to enter. The woman's sickly appearance surprised the protagonist. She didn't expect to see her like this. Ada asked the Madame if she had eaten dinner yet, and Lilia replied that she had no appetite. The woman added that, in fact, the lady already knew what was being said about her. Countess Chesterfield believed it was all her fault. She confessed that yes, she had been secretly seeing another man, but the protagonist begged her not to say that. Count Chesterfield was the first one to cheat on her. Ada apologized for her audacity, but now she wanted to return the help that the Countess had provided her before. The protagonist discovered that, although Lilia requested a divorce, the Count has no intention of accepting it. The Countess's eyes widened in surprise when Ira asked what would happen if the Count were forced to accept. Lady Goldwyn proposed doing something, so he couldn't refuse. A few days later, in Twinville, a man noticed that his master was in a very good mood today. Frederick replied that he had finally received news of his dear lady, that he had waited so long for. The young woman guided the lady to the study and informed her that the Duke was waiting for her inside. And then she opened the door and let the lady in. Frederick, with a smile on his face, greeted the lady. They finally met again. Duke Lindman instantly knew that the lady needed his help again, and the protagonist nodded, preparing to tell everything. However, Frederick asked her to wait, as he wanted to guess it himself. It could be news about Joseph, or something related to Baron Anton. The protagonist was surprised when the man mentioned, as the last piece of information, a weakness of Count Chesterfield. Eyre was interested in everything he had said, but now the most important thing was Count Chesterfield's weakness. Frederick asked if she really planned to help her wife, instead of blackmailing the Countess with that information. Anyone in her place would have done that. But heir couldn't do that to Madame. The Duke replied that he knew little about Count Chesterfield, so he would let her know when he gathered more information, sending her an invitation. The protagonist asked if it was really necessary for her to go in person. It wasn't mandatory, but Frederick wished, just on a whim, to see her again. Those words did not impress the heroine at all. She sighed deeply and said that, in that case, they would see each other next time. The lady left and Frederick burst out laughing. She was still so cold, but even that pleased him. His subordinate returned to the room and informed the master that someone had arrived regarding investments. Frederick, irritated, recalled that he had already asked to be politely declined. In reality, the man tried, but for certain reasons, he couldn't manage it. The Duke couldn't believe what the man was telling him, standing there brazenly. The coachman asked Lady Goldwyn if she was returning to Montegras or had other pending matters. Reluctantly, the young woman requested to be taken to the Goldwyn mansion. The protagonist did not like that place, although she urgently needed money now, because she had to settle her debt with Sir River and could not fail. Upon entering the mansion, the administrator received her immediately. Surprised, Merlin, perplexed, asked her mistress what she was doing there. She hadn't announced her arrival. The protagonist explained that she was coming to collect some belongings, and her uncle and aunt were not present. This news filled Ira with joy, an unexpected opportunity. The administrator, clumsily, asked the lady how she was after her fainting spell. The protagonist, with a radiant smile, replied that she was perfectly fine now. Merlin didn't expect the lady to also ask her how she was doing, as she didn't look well. The woman replied that she was just a little tired, so there was nothing to worry about. Ira asked her to tell her if her uncle was offending her in any way, but Merlin exclaimed that everything was fine. But the woman replied that the gentleman treated her very well. The protagonist nodded and informed her that, in that case, she would retire to her room. Shortly after, Ira left the family estate. However, during that time, the uncle and aunt had managed to return. The gentleman and the Baroness immediately noticed the carriage parked near the estate. They were very surprised to see Ira with a suitcase. Marcella asked the young woman, visibly annoyed, what she was doing there, as she hadn't notified them of her visit. It is quite rude of her. The lady could have done anything there, without the owners. The protagonist coldly replied that the Baroness spoke as if the house belonged to her. Marcella did not expect that answer. The uncle explained that his wife was just surprised by her sudden visit. That's why she spouted that nonsense. Ira replied that it was fine, since the uncle temporarily manages the estate now. The protagonist was about to leave, but the Baroness stopped her. She asked Ira, with disgust, what she planned to take, since she had taken many jewels, and she had spent it all. If she continues like this, Ira will squander the entire Goldwyn fortune, so it is necessary to limit the young woman's expenses. Edis Anton supported this idea. Before talking about extravagance, they should look at themselves, swimming in luxury and spending money on trinkets. But now heir shouldn't anger them, so it's better to keep quiet. So the protagonist promised that from now on she would ask her uncle for permission before spending family money. She said goodbye to her relatives, promising to write next time before visiting them. Edis Anton didn't understand what heir was plotting. Before she was so quiet and obedient, but now she is clearly hiding something. The man recalled that, just before losing consciousness, his brother was trying to contact Count Byron. He will have to find out more about it, but first, he needs to put Era in her place. The gentleman took a business card out of his dresser. It has been a while since he visited the head of the Lumiere company, so it's time to fix that. Days later, Era read about an unresolved scandal related to an illegitimate son. She put the newspapers aside. She couldn't keep reading that nonsense anymore. Ada thought she was in control, but it seemed the situation was controlling her. She kept telling herself that once everything was resolved, those rumors would disappear on their own. If only. Frederick presented her with information about Count Chesterfield. Interesting. It was a lot of information, even insignificant details, but she preferred to read it all. The Duke nodded, opining that you never know what might be useful. Better safe than sorry. It turned out that Frederick offered to summarize the information, just to play a joke on her. But he noticed that the lady needed another favor. A newspaper kept defaming her. Ira simply asked to ignore it. She didn't want to give it importance. She suspected her uncle was behind it. If she intervened, everything could get much worse. Frederick asked the lady to let him know if she couldn't bear it anymore. He didn't like seeing his mistress sad. The protagonist revealed that she wouldn't stand idly by. She had a plan. Her goal, to reclaim what is rightfully hers. And for that, Era might have to attack her own uncle. The Duke was surprised to learn that the lady tried to meet with the gentleman's people. However, no one agreed to speak with her, not even Lionel Anton's friends, nor those close to the crown princess, which surprised no one. Lionel is pressured by the gentleman and the princess's people. The heir simply fear getting involved with Lady Goldwyn. Definitely, heir is not having a good time. The protagonist asked the man how much she owed him for the information, but the Duke didn't charge her anything. This was wonderful, just when heir was short on money. The girl revealed that her uncle forbade her from spending money without permission. Before the lady left, Frederick told her she could turn to him whenever she wanted if she needed help. He could find a way to help her without raising suspicion. The protagonist thanked the Duke, but assured him she would manage on her own. If you rely too much on the help of others, you might become dependent on whoever helps you. The lady left and Frederick's gaze darkened. Caspar was left wide-mouthed upon learning that her mistress had obtained information about Count Chesterfield. The protagonist said she found a lot of information in Twinville. This made the maid even more surprised. Caspar knew very well that information from Twinville was very expensive, so she asked how much the lady had paid. With a satisfied smile, Ira replied that absolutely nothing. Apparently, the owner of Twinville simply took a liking to her. Caspar eagerly asked if the lady had managed to find out who Twinville really belongs to. Only now did Ira realize that no one knew that information. And apparently, Frederick didn't want to reveal it. Even if the protagonist told someone now, no one would believe her anyway. The Count's image was impeccable. He has no problems with business, nor is he on bad terms with anyone. But suddenly, the protagonist saw a page whose edge was folded. The young woman took it out and began to examine it closely. It spoke of the shady use of funds raised at the charity gala, and then data about the mansion's servants. Now, Ada knew Count Chesterfield's weak spot. It is crucial that we keep all of this. But again, a sudden headache overwhelmed the protagonist. Caspar was frightened when her mistress suddenly bent over and groaned softly in pain. It had never happened before, so the protagonist didn't understand why she suddenly felt so bad. The maid suggested calling the priests, but Ira refused. She decided that the next morning she would go directly to see Sir River. The next day she did just that. In the end, the protagonist didn't sleep all night. Ira is uncomfortable coming to this man only when she needs him, but that is how their relationship works. She must pull herself together, and everything will be fine. Cheer up. But instead of Sir River, the one who received the lady was Count Rose Byron. The man explained that he was substituting for his son, as the latter was absent from the estate. Era, with sadness in her voice, apologized for the trouble caused. She was already about to leave, but the Count begged her to stay for tea. Of course, our protagonist couldn't refuse such an invitation. She asked the Count if he had anything to communicate to her. Rao knew that lately, the lady frequently sought out River. Of course, even if he was accepted into high society, his duty remained to protect the North as a knight. The lady should perfectly understand that he cannot stay in the capital forever and be his partner. Ira directly asked the Count if it bothered him that it seemed like she was using Sir River. However, the man didn't think so and believed that, in a way, River really needed to be used. The protagonist didn't understand. Doesn't the Count know what she wants? However, Rose finds the current method unacceptable, as it resembles an attempt to restore honor more than anything else. The Count wasn't sure if constantly appearing in public really benefited River. The protagonist tried to explain herself. However, a sudden pain prevented her from doing so. Rose noticed the change in the lady, and unexpectedly the girl asked, what should she do? Wherever she goes, there is only caution and suspicion, so she cannot act sensibly. The blonde simply chose the method that yields immediate results. Reacting, Ira immediately apologized and explained that she had been very irritable lately. Unexpectedly, Count Byron revealed that before Duke Goldwyn fainted. He tried to contact him. Rose had words he wanted to say to him, but he never had the chance. He was eager to convey them, so he begged the lady to protect the Goldwyn family. So Count Byron and the protagonist's father knew each other. Ada promised to protect her father and help convey what was left unsaid. But if the Count were to trust her, she could tell him personally when she deemed it appropriate. Rose hoped that would happen soon. Shortly after, the protagonist returned to Montegras. Caspar ran out to meet her. The maid asked if Sir River had returned, and Ada replied no, so she simply left. Caspar learned that the lady had a very bad headache again. She decided to inform the priests to give her some medicine, but the protagonist said it wasn't necessary. Suddenly, a man appeared in front of them. The priest Jezwael was returning just now from the herb garden. Without thinking twice, Casper asked if by chance he had herbs that helped with headaches. It seems the lady is suffering from a very strong headache. Jezwael asked the lady to stay in her room, as he would prepare an infusion himself and bring it to her. The maid thanked the priest instantly. The man replied that it was not worth the trouble and left. At first, Priest Jezwael seemed cold and stern to Casper, but when you get to know him better, you conclude that he is truly a good person. Casper asked the lady how the medicine tasted. The protagonist replied that it was quite tolerable. Perhaps it was just her imagination, but it seemed that the headache had really lessened a bit. The maid was very happy to hear that. Suddenly, the door was knocked on, and the lady was informed that she had a visitor. Since it was so unexpected, the protagonist started thinking it might be her uncle, but it turned out that Sir River Byron was urgently requesting a meeting with her, which greatly surprised the protagonist. Ada immediately went towards the man. River asked the lady what the Count had spoken to her about. With just a fleeting glance at that girl, the man instantly started blushing. The protagonist gently touched his hair and replied that it was nothing important, so he shouldn't worry. Instead, she extended her hand and proposed they take a walk. River's face turned even redder. However, without hesitation, he took Ira's hand. The protagonist supposed that the Lord had come on purpose, worried about what they had discussed with the Count. If the lady had really wanted to hide it from him, River wouldn't have even found out. Ira stood in front of the man and told him that, if he himself had come to her, then everything was fine now, and she just wanted to see him. Every time the protagonist made that face, River couldn't hide his embarrassment. But suddenly, he said that if nothing really had happened, it was good. Ada confessed that, actually, she wasn't sure if she was doing the right thing. She can't even manage her own affairs well, and now, she also causes trouble for others. The protagonist decided to ask Sir River if he had ever felt unwell or uncomfortable because of her. But in reality, the man had never thought about that. Although the lady sometimes causes him difficulties, despite that, he likes being close to her. That's why he asked the lady to always call him if she ever needed help. He is always willing to be used. Ira let out a soft giggle, noticing that it sounded almost like a confession. River instantly apologized to the lady if she had interpreted it that way, but she believed there was no need to apologize. What woman wouldn't want a confession from Sir River? The dark-haired man suddenly asked what she thought. What would she do if it really were a declaration? The protagonist reflected and replied that he couldn't truly confess, so the conversation was pointless. But in any case, she thanked the man for having said it. However, she didn't plan to use him in the way he suggested. Instead, perhaps the protagonist would soon need his help again. She promised to let him know as soon as she made a decision. With a warm smile, River said he would wait eagerly. The protagonist knocked on Countess Chesterfield's door and asked if she had a minute. Lilia granted Lady Goldwyn permission to enter. Ada asked Countess Chesterfield if she had considered what they discussed last time. The woman decided to follow the lady's advice and divorce her husband. The trial will be hard, but when it's over, she will finally find peace. The protagonist proposed to the Countess to tell her everything that was happening in the mansion, and she also showed her a portrait of a servant who worked in the Chesterfield mansion, but the Countess didn't recognize him at all. Ira revealed that this man had worked in the mansion until recently, and then suddenly resigned. In that case, the protagonist believed it was worth interrogating him. Lilia left the mansion a while ago, so it's time to find out what the situation is like now. Better safe than sorry, don't you think? Actually, it was Countess Chesterfield's duty, but she felt guilty towards the lady. The protagonist said there was no need, and added that she would try to gather as much information as possible. The Countess sincerely thanked Ira. She even called her by name. The blonde smiled and replied that she was delighted to help. A little later at the casino, the man cursed. Luck was not on his side again. He will lose here and now, that's clear. But the hero begged them to wait. Next time he would win and take the jackpot. If he really wanted to, he would have defeated them all a long time ago. Just at that moment, knights burst into the casino. Everyone present panicked, thinking it was a raid. The finger of one of the knights pointed to their main target, the reason they were there. It was precisely this man who was mentioned in the documents the lady had handed over. The man immediately collapsed, begging the knights to forgive him, and to let him go at least once, since he had only been there for a month. But unexpectedly, the knight kindly asked him to get up. The red-haired protagonist was stunned to learn that Lady Goldwyn wanted to meet with him. The heroine praised the knights for their good work. One of them replied that, thanks to the lady, he could even go out on the street, which was already nice. Although the job could have been more interesting, Ada asked to thank Sir River. What a waste of time for the Byron Knights. The others can return, but only one will stay in case things get complicated. And then, the protagonist addressed the man, telling him she was glad to see him. He asked why he was called, and Ira calmly assured him, "I don't intend to hurt you." She invited him to sit down, after such an exhausting journey. A few minutes later, the man confirmed, "Yes, I worked on Count Chesterfield's estate for a few months." The protagonist cared about only one thing. "Why did you leave the estate?" The man replied that you don't always need a reason to quit. He simply decided to return to his homeland, but she knew the truth. He stayed in the capital and began participating in underground games. They say Count Chesterfield gave him a good severance package. Something important happened in the mansion, but the guy couldn't say anything, because he feared that the lady was with him under Count Chesterfield's orders. The protagonist deduced, something happened in the mansion, and Count Chesterfield paid for silence. Ada asked him not to worry. She was not on Count Chesterfield's side, as she was there on behalf of his wife, Countess Chesterfield. The man froze upon hearing that. The protagonist confessed that she wanted to help her and gain leverage against Count Chesterfield. She asked the former servant if he still hesitated. If Lady Goldwyn was there for the lady, he would tell everything. He was going to start his story from the times when the lady still lived in the mansion. The protagonist told him that the more detailed it was, the better. The former servant said that, when he started working in the mansion, the Count and the lady had just gotten married. Until then, nothing particularly noteworthy had happened. But everything changed after the Count brought his mistress home. Every time Vera appeared before him, he felt incredibly happy to see her. In turn, the mistress was often late because she wanted to dress beautifully for her beloved. They didn't even hide their relationship in front of the Countess. The lady started being treated as if she didn't exist in that house. However, there were also those who felt a lot of pity for the lady. Every time the servants whispered about it furtively, Vera noticed, and she severely ordered them to work instead of gossiping. In the end, the lady couldn't bear it anymore and left the mansion. The Count and his mistress were glad that everything finally returned to its place. However, some servants didn't understand this. They were not going to accept the Count's mistress as their lady, much less obey her, because the true mistress is the one they served before. The next morning, the Count gathered all the servants. He furiously reported that, after last night's dinner, someone had dared to speak ill of Vera. The Count pointed to the narrator's companion in the story. He started thinking about what punishment to devise so that the servant would regret it for the rest of his life. Those words made the employee completely terrified. The Count and that woman acted like masters in a house without a lady. So, one after another, those who supported the lady started disappearing. But the narrator of this story survived despite everything. After that chaos, he lived like a ghost, trying not to attract attention, and left the mansion afterwards. All of this happened because of a simple incident. The man knocked on the door of the Count's office, and finding no one, he was happy, and he decided to resolve it quickly. He began to check the papers on the desk. Suddenly, a sheet fell to the floor. Upon picking it up, the protagonist instantly recognized the income report from the charity gala, which was kept separate. This infuriated the man, because he discovered that the Count had taken that money illegally. But suddenly, Chief Chesterfield returned to the office and caught the servant. The narrator explained that he was only checking papers and hurried to leave, but they stopped him. The Count instantly knew he had seen it. The hero froze, and his heart began to beat rapidly out of fear. It was too obvious not to understand it. The servant made excuses, saying he didn't understand anything, but the Count didn't even listen to him. He simply fired him and threatened him. If he left the house in silence, he would at least save his miserable life. Ira concluded that they paid him severance. He left the mansion and started gambling in illegal bets. If only they had concrete evidence against Count Chesterfield, the protagonist decided to find out if there was any servant left who still supported the Countess. The divorce trial of Count and Countess Chesterfield took place discreetly at the end of June. After the social season ended, the court had a document confirming that the Count organized charity galas, but he kept the donations. The head of the Chesterfield family didn't understand how the truth could have come to light. A slight smile appeared on the Countess's lips. A little earlier, she had met with a person. Removing her hood, Lilia asked the young woman if she had found what she had asked for. The maid nodded and handed the document to her lady. Countess Chesterfield promised to reward her properly as soon as she returned to the mansion. But the young woman replied that she didn't need any reward and only wanted her lady to return soon. Anger made the count clench his jaw. No longer hiding anything, he shouted that he wasn't the only one to blame. That woman was cheating on him too. The judge asked the countess if it was true. Lilia honestly replied that yes, it was true. After the death of the former counts of Chesterfield, her parents, her husband almost immediately brought a mistress into the house. Even when pretending to be an affectionate husband, he met with another woman. Although Lilia was unfaithful during the marriage, it was already broken, so she was only seeking comfort. However, this divorce is not because of her infidelity, but because of the crimes committed by Count Chesterfield. The judge listened attentively to the countess's words and was ready to pronounce the sentence. Countess Lilia Chesterfield admitted her infidelity, but it was also determined that Count Chesterfield cheated on her during the marriage too with a mistress who now lives on the estate. Furthermore, in the countess's case, her action occurred after the breakdown of their union. Meanwhile, Count Chesterfield dishonored the family honor and caused serious damage to his fortune. Therefore, the court orders the dissolution of the marriage between Count and Countess Chesterfield, and all property returns to the countess. In addition, the title of count is revoked and returns to Countess Chesterfield, and with this, the court session is over. Lilia was immensely grateful to Lady Goldwyn, as without her, she would not have been able to find evidence. Now, the protagonist must return to the mansion, as the social season is already over. Countess Chesterfield told her that if she ever needs help, Lady can always count on her. Finally, everything fits together. Now it's the protagonist's turn to claim what is hers. The next day, Lady Goldwyn returned to her ancestral home, although she knew no one expected her arrival. Briefly, the young woman wondered how Joseph was doing. The protagonist knew she had to weaken her uncle's influence in Goldwyn to achieve her goals. And to do that, the first thing was to get him back. Shortly after, the Goldwyn family gathered for dinner. With every fiber of her being, the protagonist felt that Baroness Marcella wanted to say something unpleasant to her. Without waiting, the young woman got up and announced that she wasn't feeling well, so she would retire to her chambers. Marcella became enraged, but the Baron suggested they finish eating. They told him that his niece fainted in Montegras, but that wasn't true, so the man decided to talk to Inglesi. At that moment, River finally arrived in the north, to the lands of the Byrons. The villagers were filled with joy upon seeing their lord. They approached immediately, and River apologized for arriving so late. But they, smiling, replied that thanks to the compensation, they completely rebuilt the village. A child approached River and enthusiastically declared that he too wanted to be a noble knight, because he also wanted to help people, just like him, since thanks to Lord River his mother could receive treatment. She was injured by monsters, but they didn't have money for urgent care. But now they can save her. All the adults say it is only thanks to Sir River. The man stroked the child's head, affirming that it was a noble ambition and promising that he would undoubtedly become a great knight. But River had to continue his journey, so he said goodbye to his subjects. In reality, he felt miserable, because he had taken credit for Lady Goldwyn's merit, whom everyone should thank. The protagonist secretly followed the servants. The short-haired maid pushed the poor girl herself and started yelling at her on top of that. The servants who had been working there for a long time are now forced to obey the new ones. To change the situation, the protagonist will have to start small, as her uncle did at the time. Ira returned to her room. She didn't expect to find Casper inside, who asked the lady if she had already done everything she wanted. If the lady needs help, she will always be willing to collaborate. The protagonist nodded and made a request to the girl. Casper hurried to fulfill her mistress's assignment. She soon returned with the news that factions had formed among the servants, and now one group openly despised the other. Ada asked how they were carrying out their tasks. Casper took a look at the kitchen, where only a few were working, but the one Lady Goldwyn had mentioned especially stood out, and that maid was giving orders to the others. No matter how important that person was to her uncle, he wouldn't give her so much power, and the protagonist knew it very well. Ira requested a meeting with her uncle, and the reply came 3 days later. Edis directly asked his niece what matter she wanted to discuss with him. The protagonist told him that some problems had arisen among the servants. Some started giving orders to others, neglecting their own responsibilities. Ira lied, saying the maids looked for her. The situation was truly serious. Baron Edis promised to talk to them, but the protagonist was adamant. She wanted those maids replaced immediately. The uncle began to explain to Ira that replacing servants was not easy. They would have to pay severance to everyone, to which she replied, "If subordinates undermine discipline, that will cause a riot in the higher echelons." Taking a breath, the uncle asked her for the list of servants. He would observe them and take measures. As soon as Edis left, the protagonist sighed in relief. Now all that was left was to meet with Joseph. Upon arrival, Frederick, like a true gentleman, helped Lady Goldwyn out of the carriage. The protagonist immediately noticed Joseph, snatching a small bag from someone. She was about to intervene, completely ignoring Frederick fearfully asking her to stop. But the girl burst into the dispute and asked what the hell was going on there. The man pointed at Joseph and reported that he had stolen something from him and was now denying everything. The former butler dropped the bag of money and fled upon seeing Lady Goldwyn approaching. The protagonist chased Joseph and managed to catch up to him in seconds. She asked him if he had been intentionally avoiding meeting her all this time. Ada begged him to spare her a moment, and Joseph agreed, aware that it was inevitable. River received an invitation to the Royal Guard's tactical meeting to fight monsters. If he accepts, he can travel to the capital and maybe, just maybe, see Lady Goldwyn. Joseph took the lady and her companion to the building and apologized, as there weren't many quiet places to talk. Ira replied that if it was just a conversation, any place would do. The protagonist sat down at the table and thanked Joseph for sparing her his time. First of all, the young woman decided to ask how he ended up in such a place. Ira promised Joseph she would help him return to the Goldwyn mansion as butler. However, the man declared that he had no intention of returning. Therefore, Joseph wanted the lady to stop worrying about him. He begged her not to contact him anymore. Then he got up from the table and left the annex. Frederick asked if she really wanted to get that man back, as it would be faster to find another. But only Joseph could fully understand the protagonist and help her, which is why he was vital to her. River arrived at Montegras, and the administrator received him immediately. Ellie quickly sensed that the man had very clear objectives for coming, so she informed him that Lady Goldwyn had already returned to the mansion. And sadness flooded the Lord's face. So that he wouldn't leave just like that, the administrator decided to offer him tea and ask about that golden light in passing. River asked if it was really such an important thing. It turns out that the color gold is usually interpreted as a divine blessing. If that light appeared upon touching, perhaps the couple was chosen by the gods. That is why the lady was able to wake up. River confessed that Count Byron does not believe in God, and he, influenced, is not very religious either. But still, the man wanted to know if that blessing only appears through physical contact. Ellie explained that it usually depends on the type. But generally, yes, River couldn't help but wonder if the lady knew about the blessing and acted that way on purpose. But he couldn't just go and ask her directly. That would be fatal. The next day, the protagonist headed to the main temple itself. The headache didn't stop. It was unbearable, but she held on tight. Ira had her head bowed when suddenly she saw a person on the top step. She was surprised to realize she had run into Sir River. The protagonist admitted she didn't know he wasn't in the capital. River replied to Lady Goldwyn that he also didn't expect to find her there. The girl asked what brought him to the temple, and he replied that he wanted to find something out. And he also decided to ask the lady what brought her here. Ira recounted that she came to visit her father, as he is here under the care of the priests, and receiving treatment. An awkward silence spread between the protagonists. Closing her eyes, River informed the lady that he had to leave. But suddenly, the protagonist grabbed his hand and anxiously begged Lord River to wait. The girl instantly felt her headache begin to disappear. She let go of the man and apologized, explaining that she had simply gotten too excited to see him. The lady was the first to touch him again. River never thought he would start paying attention to such things. He told the lady that he was also glad to see her. And then, without another word, he left. The protagonist entered the room where her father lay. She sat down in a chair and immediately apologized for not visiting him lately. High Priest Amadia entered the room and, seeing the lady, said with a warm smile that he hadn't seen her in a long time. The protagonist returned the smile, greeting the man. The High Priest offered to bring her tea, but the young woman kindly refused. She decided to ask about her father's health. Amadia, with sadness in his voice, told her that he still showed no signs of waking up. He promised to try to pay him more attention, but Ira replied that he was already doing enough. Surprisingly, the high priest asked the lady how she was feeling. She rarely visited the temple, so Amadia began to worry if she was too busy and taking care of his health. The protagonist wondered if she should hide her headaches and insomnia, even from the high priest. In the past, her uncle once asked her if she felt unwell. Perhaps it was due to recent events, so Ethis promised to order the doctor to prepare medicine for her. The protagonist sincerely thanked her uncle at that moment, but unexpectedly, the man asked his niece not to tell anyone else about her discomfort, except him, because one should not show their weaknesses. There was no error in his words, and the protagonist truly agreed with that. However, the problem was something else. The uncle clearly had a hidden motive. He gave poison to Era through Engelsi. He forbade anyone from speaking of her condition, so that she couldn't get medicine from another source. The protagonist did not understand how she could realize this only now. The priest noticed the lady's strange state, and she explained that she sleeps poorly lately, and sometimes her head hurts. Amadia asked worriedly since when this had started. Ira recounted that this has been happening for a while, but recently it had improved, although now it has started again. But everything is fine, as it is not a serious illness. The high priest needs to focus on the father, so Ira did not want to worry him over something so trivial. Amadia promised to prepare a blessed prayer for the lady, and the protagonist thanked him. Then the high priest left the room. Alone, Ira told her father about her intention to bring Joseph back to the mansion. During this time, the uncle has replaced many servants, and this is not the only thing that needs fixing. But if everything is done gradually, by the time the father wakes up, everything will be back in place. The protagonist decided to make that promise. The Baron shouted indignantly. He invested so much money in that bastard, and now he says he can't support the knight. Rumors must continue to be spread about Era. The problem is not that she is a bastard, but that the prophecy was misinterpreted. The Baron's men started the rumor of the engagement breakup, but they didn't fuel it so it wouldn't be forgot. Ethis ordered his man to find out who had recently contacted the head of the Lumiere trading house. It is useless for the Baron now to try to use a poison that already failed to kill his niece. Ethis asked for Inglesey to be brought to him, as he has a task for him. The next day, the doctor appeared in the Baron's office. Ethis asked how things were going, and Inglesey replied that everything was still the same for now. That means he will be able to prepare a new medicine for Ira. This surprised the doctor. Since the previous poison didn't work, maybe he found an antidote, so he will have to go back to the tried-and-true method. The Baron recalled that his patience is not infinite. Therefore, he ordered the poison dose to be doubled. Engelsay, worried, tried to explain that it would be too obvious, and they would surely leave traces. The Baron agreed, but he didn't care, since there was no evidence against him. If the doctor didn't want to do it, he could say so immediately, and in that case, Ethis would find someone else. The doctor bowed and promised the Baron to carry out any of his orders. Days later, Anglesey returned to the Goldwyn mansion. The head maid, Merlin, received him immediately. The man opened his briefcase to search for and give the woman the week's medicines, and then he handed over the vial. He asked her to make sure the lady took it properly. Merlin gave Anglesey a blood sample from the lady and asked if she shouldn't know how she felt. The doctor admitted he was worried that her condition wouldn't change. The head maid was sure that the lady would soon recover, since Anglesey was the one making the medicine. The man nodded and before leaving, asked her to take care of the lady. In the end, he failed to increase the poison dose. Luckily, the maid took the medicine, knowing nothing, and not the Baron, who would have doubted the dosage. At that precise moment, River was opening the letter he had just received. In it, Ira apologized for their recent encounter and proposed meeting to clear everything up. River could have simply fled north, but instead of leaving a bitter taste, he preferred to face her, even if it hurt his soul. So the man replied to the letter, and shortly after they met, Sir River invited the noble lady to his residence. The protagonist thanked him for the invitation with a slight bow. With a kind smile, the man begged the lady to allow him to accompany her to a quiet place. Sitting opposite each other, Ira apologized again for what happened at the temple. River was completely astonished. The protagonist, confused, asked him if he wasn't surprised that she suddenly took his hand. Ira thought he had been annoyed at that moment, but River assured her that it wasn't true. The lady had not disturbed him. The man simply had some personal matters troubling him. To Ira, It seemed like an eternity since they had had a conversation like that last time. As the social season had ended, River was obliged to return north. Bitterly, the young woman confessed that it had been a long time since she sat down to chat alone with someone. River told her that he had visited Montegras not long ago. The protagonist learned that the Countess of Chesterfield was still there. As long as Priest Jeswell was in that place, Lilia had no reason to leave. Ada decided that she too would have to visit the Countess someday. River realized that talking about Montegras really cheered up Lady Goldwyn. The last time he saw her, she had a grim expression, so the man even started to worry. The protagonist was surprised when River suddenly stood up, and then he sat right next to her. Unexpectedly, River asked the lady if he could take her hand. The protagonist did not expect to hear such a request. River explained that when she takes his hand, her expression becomes more serene, and he would like her to always feel calm, even if that means using it to his own advantage. How intriguing. In a subdued voice, Ada reminded River that when they met in Twinville, she confessed to suffering from insomnia. At that moment, it seemed to River that it was a rather strange excuse, honestly, but the girl revealed that the headaches and insomnia had tormented her for over a year. And nothing seemed to work. She only managed to fall asleep in bed with a man, and that was after drinking industrial amounts of alcohol. However, attention. After meeting River, a miracle occurred. The pain that had been torturing her all that time disappeared. That is why the protagonist started looking for him desperately, although Ada now perfectly understood that it wasn't right. She should have told him sooner, so she apologized again for her rude behavior. River replied that it was okay, because he highly doubted she would have believed him at that moment. If I had told him, to be honest, even now it's a bit hard for him to believe, huh? But River confidently assured the lady that, if she needed it, she could contact him at any time. If necessary, he would postpone his return north. And to the rest, River would simply say that he decided to stay in the capital a little longer. The protagonist smiled widely and thanked River. The man tried his best to escape his pursuer. However, he stumbled over a small stone and fell to the ground, painfully scraping his hands against the cobblestone path. The hero began to back away, realizing with horror that the pursuer wanted to strike him. Crimson blood splattered the walls of a discreet alley. The pursuer didn't understand why run away, since you know they will catch you sooner or later anyway. Frederick took off his hood and said with disgust that this irritated him greatly. The Duke looked around the corner and discovered the man he was looking for. Joseph was injured and lay unconscious on the ground. Taking a deep breath, Frederick lifted the former butler. For the lady, one does whatever it takes. He took Joseph to the house and laid him on a bed. Afterwards, he treated and bandaged the wound, wondering who would want to attack him. That man did not look like a simple bandit, so maybe someone held a grudge against Joseph. The next day, Lady Goldwyn visited Frederick. She looked at him confusedly when the man intently studied her face for a few seconds. Frederick concluded that the lady's situation, apparently, was getting better. He supposed that something good had happened. The Duke even felt a bit of envy, as he felt himself aging day by day because of the lady. Ira did not understand what he meant, and Frederick added that it was only a joke. But the man said that something really happened a few days ago, although the heroine didn't know right away if it was a joke or not. She knew the Duke was having a hard time because of her, so she promised that she would definitely reward him for everything. Frederick replied that he would eagerly await it. He was sure that the lady surely had come to hear news about Joseph. He recently suffered a serious wound, but Frederick gave him first aid and called a doctor, so everything should be fine. Ada did not understand how the Duke could talk about that with such carelessness, but Frederick replied that he always thinks of the lady and worries about Joseph's safety. The protagonist said she wanted to see him, and the Duke suggested it be tomorrow, but the girl declared she wanted to see him right at that moment. They did so, although Joseph again asked them to leave. Again and again, the former butler repeated that he would not return to the mansion. The protagonist asked if he would even if the Goldwyn estate fell into the uncle's hands. Ira did not understand why he had left and was hiding in such a place. But the protagonist wasn't just asking him to come back, she wanted Joseph to help her, because her intention was to recover the Goldwyn estate. The former butler did not expect to hear something like that. Just before losing consciousness, the Duke conveyed a message. The man reached for the drawer and opened it immediately. It turns out that Duke Goldwyn knew someone had him in their sights, and he thought Baron Anton might be behind all this. That's why he left Joseph some documents that the former butler kept, and now he handed them over to the lady. The protagonist did not understand why he was telling her this only now. In reality, Joseph simply didn't know how serious the lady's intentions were. Since he thought she only needed support, he always saw her as a bright and cheerful girl, so he believed she could endure all this. Frederick asked Joseph, with some displeasure, if he hadn't underestimated Ada too much. The man said that those documents contained information about the Duke's secret funds and his sources of income, and most importantly, they held information about Baron Anton's weaknesses. If Joseph had handed over those documents earlier, Lady Goldwyn wouldn't have suffered so much. But if that had happened when Ada suspected nothing, everything would have been snatched away from her. Frederick informed the lady that he would wait outside. Joseph asked the girl what kind of relationship she had with Duke Linman. Apparently, he is helping her, but the protagonist couldn't reveal that she met him in Twinville. So Ada told Joseph that they met at a social event. And since then, he started helping her. The former butler revealed that he had run into him several times, but this was the first time they had spoken. It seems the Duke resolved the issue of desertification of the Western lands. That's why he returned to the capital. The protagonist remembered that the Linman lands are in the West and that, a year ago, the Duke faced desertification. Ira was so absorbed in her problems that she completely forgot. The lady announced she had to leave and asked Joseph to return to the mansion as soon as the situation calmed down. The man, with a smile, replied that he would do so. Furthermore, Ira planned to talk to the Duke so that Joseph wouldn't have to stay in such a place. As soon as the lady went out onto the street, Frederick asked if everything had gone well, and she nodded. The Duke opened the door for her, and the protagonist announced they were heading to the Goldwyn estate. Frederick helped the young woman into the carriage. The protagonist decided to read the documents Joseph had given her, so she took everything out. But suddenly, a small note fell onto her lap, immediately catching the protagonist's attention. She picked it up and read its content, which caused her to freeze. It said the following: "If Ira is reading this, the situation is critical. If someone threatens her, she can go to Montegras and look for Priest Eli." But while she was in Montegras, she never tried to talk to him. Since the father wrote the note, the information must be real. So the protagonist will have to visit Montegras soon. Ira returned to the Goldwyn mansion. Marseille received her immediately, angrily asking where she had been and why she was so late. Caspar greeted his mistress, and the protagonist told the Baroness that she had had an important meeting. Without stopping, Ira went straight to her room. Marcella demanded she stop and show what she was hiding in her hands, but the protagonist replied that it was nothing important, so there was nothing to worry about. The Baroness did not expect such insolence from that conceited brat. Those words hurt her deeply, but she could do nothing against Ira, so she remained silent. The Baron asked his wife what had happened. Marcella, desperate, asked her husband how much longer he would tolerate his niece's impertinence. She gets more insolent every day. The impudent girl has already attended several social events and now thinks she's a big deal. Ethos tried to calm his wife, telling her they just needed to wait a little longer, because soon Ira would face reality. The protagonist returned to her room. She explained to Caspar that what she held in her hand was crucial. The maid was surprised, because earlier the young woman had said there was nothing important there. The protagonist asked Caspar not to worry so much. Ira decided to re-examine all the documents. She had an important request for the maid, something perhaps complicated. The protagonist wanted her to watch Siles for a while. If they want Joseph to return to the mansion, the butler position must be vacant. Caspar asked what would happen if the butler was innocent. However, the protagonist greatly doubted that he was as everyone saw him. Night falls and silence completely floods the mansion, so Caspar must tread carefully and not make the slightest sound. But suddenly, the young woman spots someone else wandering the hallway at this hour. The head maid was startled when Caspar called her. The young woman asked worriedly if everything was all right, and Merlin replied yes, just a coughing fit. The woman asked Miss Caspar what she was doing around here at this hour. The protagonist clumsily replied that she couldn't sleep and decided to take a walk. However, even walking around the mansion at night is dangerous, so Caspar must return to her room. The young woman nodded, and Merlin went about her business. Everything was very strange, and the maid even started to think it was a product of her imagination. But clearly, there was blood on the woman's handkerchief. The protagonist was sitting in her room, meticulously studying all the documents. She discovered that Sale's father had served in the Goldwyn house, but they cut ties after an incident. Ira wondered if her uncle knew anything about this. All that remains is to hope Casper can find something out. The protagonist decided it was time to finish for today. Tomorrow, she had a meeting with Sir River. The next day, the young woman told the man everything she had discovered in Joseph's documents. River reminded the lady that she had forgot something important. He extended his hand, implying she should touch him. The protagonist did so immediately, feeling instant relief. She, somewhat apologetic, confessed to River that holding hands was complicated. Then, the man suggested devising another way next time. The protagonist smiled and asked him if he himself prepared the desserts, and River nodded. He didn't know the lady didn't like them, so he prepared everything he could. With a warm smile, the girl replied that she did like them, but she only took one sip of tea. The man concluded that she didn't like sweets very much. River remembered he wanted to ask the lady something. He was curious to know what relationship Ira had with Duke Frederick Lindman. The protagonist explained that he simply helps her with matters she cannot resolve alone. With a sad voice, River asked if perhaps he couldn't provide her with the necessary help. It turned out he was worried that she was seeing the Duke. Of course, the protagonist understood why Sir River was worried about that. But regarding the Duke's information network, Sir River cannot compare. River apologized, feeling he shouldn't have said any of that. Knowing the lady's difficult situation, he shouldn't let his feelings cloud his judgment. The protagonist promised Sir River that, as soon as everything was resolved, and she could finally breathe a sigh of relief, they could talk about what was in her heart. River nodded, agreeing with the girl's words. The protagonist looked away from her book when Casper sighed deeply once more. So Ira decided to ask her what was wrong. The maid asked her mistress if she didn't think the head maid looked unwell. The protagonist replied that Merlin always said she was fine. Casper recounted that the night before she went out to the garden to check on the butler, but she ran into Merlin in the hallway. Ira was surprised she decided to go out at night, but the girl replied that it was the best time to move unseen. In any case, the head maid was coughing into a handkerchief. Casper swore she saw drops of blood on it. Merlin didn't look well, so the girl started to worry about her health. The protagonist promised she would talk to her later. Casper didn't notice anything else strange, but the young woman promised to notify immediately if she noticed anything odd. If Casper is in danger, the protagonist asked her to say that she forced her to do it. The protagonist supposed she should be glad she felt no pressure. Days later, Casper burst into her mistress's room, happy that she was already awake. The maid whispered to her mistress that this information had to be kept secret. The protagonist instructed the other maids to leave the room immediately. That meant only one thing. Casper had managed to find something important. Yesterday, the maid went out to the garden and walked to the butler's room. Although she wasn't sure where his room was, she had a rough idea of the area. That's why she stopped when she knew for sure she had found her target. The light was still on in the room, so Casper was surprised that the butler wasn't asleep yet. The window suddenly flew open, and screams echoed from inside. Immediately after, a man jumped into the street, muttering that this irritated him greatly. In other words, someone was in Sile's room. He didn't look like someone who came with good intentions. Precisely, taking a deep breath, the protagonist congratulated Casper and begged her not to go out at night. Ira kept wondering how to catch that individual. She needed someone on the estate, willing to help and capable of restraining an adult man. The protagonist wondered if it was worth inviting Sir River to the estate, but she quickly dismissed the idea, as her uncle would never allow it. So Ira considered asking someone else for help. A few nights later, the entire mansion was in chaos. They had found an intruder. With all the commotion and shouting, the Baron awoke startled. He went downstairs to the first floor and asked what the devil was going on there. The maids told him that a villain had sneaked onto the estate, and they say he is a hired killer. Luckily, the stable boy saw him and managed to catch him. Now Ethos must see with his own eyes the idiot who dared to invade his property. The maids led the master to the indicated place. The protagonist, indignant, snapped at him how he dared to enter the Goldwyn mansion. For his audacity, he will now have to pay the consequences. With a forced smile, the Baron asked Ira to return to her room, but she flatly refused. This is Goldwyn family land, so she must handle this as a member. And besides, Ira is the only one who can question this man objectively, because this guy has been visiting the mansion frequently on Sile's orders. The next day, the man exclaimed indignantly, "What the hell is going on here?" Siles confirmed that he himself brought the assassin to the property. How outrageous! Marcella, annoyed, asked. What reason led you to commit such an atrocity? The butler had his reasons, but he never thought of harming the residents. But whatever the reason, you cannot let strangers in without permission. Never. The man waved his hand and said. The important thing is that nothing happened in the end, but Marcella felt uncomfortable. A hired killer snuck into their house. How horrible. Anyway, many will want to be the Goldwyn butler, so Lionel suggested firing Siles. The protagonist had no need to intervene, but she still didn't understand why Siles hired an assassin. Therefore, the girl decided to find out everything upon returning to the Joseph mansion. In the end, Siles was fired, as the uncle couldn't calm his anxiety, so he didn't want to delay the dismissal any longer. However, now they needed to find a new butler as soon as possible. The family needs someone to manage the properties. Suddenly, Lionel let slip that if the aunt wasn't feeling so bad, everything would be better. The man stopped his son, and only then did he react. And then, the boy looked at the protagonist with irritation. Doubt assailed Ira. Is it because she openly mentioned her uncle's contact? But the reason is different, as Lionel made a mistake. The protagonist paused to think. Could it be that Mr. Anton has a sister he knows nothing about? Ira informed her uncle that he didn't need to bother looking for a new butler, because there is someone who already served in the house. Ethis understood she was referring to Johan. The man explained to his niece that he had already written to him, but Johan didn't reply at all. The protagonist asked her uncle in surprise, do you perhaps know where the former butler is now? But Ethis replied that most likely he is at his family's house. Therefore, the young woman decided to tell him that some time ago she received a letter from Johan. That came from the capital. The protagonist replied to him today, saying they needed a butler at the mansion, and suggested he return. The man, indignant, asked her why she hadn't consulted him. The heroine, guiltily, explained to her uncle that he himself considered Joseph, so she saw nothing wrong. The young woman added that she would let him know when she received a response. With a radiant smile, the protagonist left the dining room. The heroine was delayed a bit by the butler issue, but finally arrived at Montegras. The administrator, Ellie, received her there with joy. The woman asked the lady how she was, and the protagonist replied that she was fine, returning the question to Ellie. The administrator replied, with a smile, that everything remained the same for her. She added that Sir River had also visited them today. Right after that, the protagonist saw a man right in front of her. Ira nodded clumsily as a greeting, and River greeted her back. The protagonist perfectly remembered that the last time there was a strange atmosphere between them. River commented that, upon reflection, the last time they also met by chance. There must be some kind of connection between them. The protagonist was very surprised that if River didn't feel the awkwardness that she did. Both wanted to discuss something with the manager of Montegras. Since Sir River arrived first, Ellie suggested they decide how to proceed. The man didn't mind speaking in front of the lady, but he wanted to know what Ira thought about it. The protagonist wondered if she should mention her father in front of Sir River, but she realized she had no reason to hide anything from him. She could trust River. Having made the decision, Ellie suggested they follow her. The administrator offered tea to each of them and asked the reason for their visit. The protagonist explained that she had come after reading the documents her father left behind. Ellie immediately understood that she was referring to Duke Goldwyn. The father wrote to his daughter that the administrator of Montegras was the one who could help her. The woman revealed that Duke Goldwyn himself had sent her to that place. Before she arrived, the place was run by Father Abbot, very close to the Duke. But unfortunately, the man had recently passed away. In other words, Ellie arrived at Montegras to replace Father Abbot. The protagonist wondered if the orphanage hid some terrible secret. Although it sounded grand coming from the lady, in a way she was right. This place holds a mystery related to the death of the first prince.